In this video, we'll be breaking down 3 hours of SpongeBob special episodes lore to fall asleep to. Let's get started. First up, we got Christmas Who. Christmas Who is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants, Season 2 that aired on the 7th of December 2000. The episode shows how Christmas came to Bikini Bottom for the very first time through SpongeBob learning about the holiday from Sandy and then spreading the tradition to everyone underwater. The episode opens with live-action segments featuring Patchy the Pirate, who introduces himself as the president of the SpongeBob SquarePants fan club. Patchy is at his house in Encino, preparing for Christmas by wrapping presents and mixing cookie dough shaped like SpongeBob and Patrick. He has a puppet parrot named Potty who keeps trying to eat the cookie dough. Patchy receives a fan letter from someone asking if SpongeBob likes Christmas as much as they do. Patchy explains that there was a time when nobody in Bikini Bottom had even heard of Christmas, which sets up the main story. The underwater portion begins with SpongeBob waiting outside Sandy's tree dome wearing karate gloves. He plans to sneak up on Sandy with a surprise karate move. When he peeks through her door, he sees Sandy plugging in Christmas lights on a tree inside her home. SpongeBob completely misunderstands what he is seeing. He thinks the lights mean there is a fire happening inside the tree dome. Panicking and trying to save Sandy, SpongeBob rushes inside and throws water on her instead of on the tree. Sandy gets soaked and asks SpongeBob what is wrong with him. She wants to know if he has never seen a Christmas tree before. SpongeBob has no idea what Sandy is talking about. When she mentions Christmas, he asks her to explain what that means. He even wonders if Christmas is a friend from Texas. Sandy cannot believe that SpongeBob has never heard of Christmas before. She sits down and tells him the entire story of the holiday. The narrator explains that Sandy told SpongeBob about gumdrops and penny whistles, about toy-making elves and flying reindeer, and most importantly about Santa Claus. SpongeBob's eyes go wide as he takes in all this new information about the magical holiday. The next day at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob stands on a table and tells Squidward, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs everything he learned. He explains traditions like fruitcake and how everyone pretends to like it, but the part that really excites him is that you can write a letter to Santa Claus telling him what you want, and when he comes, he brings it to you. Patrick compares this to a genie. Mr. Krabs immediately likes the idea because any fellow who gives away free stuff is a friend of his. SpongeBob hands out paper and pencils so everyone can write their letters. Squidward refuses to participate. He says he cannot believe anyone would celebrate a holiday where a jolly prowler breaks into your house and leaves gifts. Patrick again mentions genies. Mr. Krabs sits down to write his letter, treating it like a blank check from the First National Bank of Santa Claus. SpongeBob offers paper to Patrick, but Patrick points out there are no words on the paper yet. When he tries to write, he keeps ripping his paper over and over again. SpongeBob has to give him multiple pieces of paper because Patrick keeps tearing them. At one point, Patrick tries to write with the paper on top of the pencil instead of the other way around. SpongeBob demonstrates how to write a proper letter. He writes asking Santa to visit the gentle folk in Bikini Bottom, saying that is his only wish. He puts the letter in a bottle and corks it. Outside the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob shows Patrick a mechanism he designed specifically to shoot bottles to the surface. He calls it the Maiden Voyage and says everyone's hopes rest on its success. He presses the button and the bottle shoots up through the water toward the surface. Patrick immediately asks where Santa is. SpongeBob explains that Santa does not come until Christmas Eve. Mr. Krabs brings his letter next. When SpongeBob asks what he wished for, Mr. Krabs says a pony. SpongeBob seems surprised by this simple wish, but then Mr. Krabs adds that he wants the pony to have saddlebags full of money. His bottle gets shot to the surface. Patrick brings his letter too. When asked what he wished for, Patrick says he asked for another piece of paper. A little girl wishes for front teeth. A cowboy wants a new hat. A woman named Carol needs a new hairstyle. An old man named Lonnie would like a glass of water for his teeth. Lots and lots of bottles shoot up to the surface, carrying all these wishes. Squidward pushes through the crowd saying excuse me and coming through. SpongeBob gets excited thinking Squidward finished his letter and asks what he wished for. Squidward reads his wish out loud. He wishes that the people of Bikini Bottom would stop paying attention to the inane dribble constantly streaming out of this dunderhead's mouth. He clearly means SpongeBob. SpongeBob responds gently, saying maybe Santa will bring him a dictionary so he can understand what Squidward just said. Then SpongeBob announces to everyone that now that they have summoned Santa Claus, they must ready themselves for his arrival. Everyone cheers. A musical number called The Very First Christmas begins. SpongeBob and Patrick chop down a coral tree while singing about how it is shaping up to be a wonderful holiday. Squidward realizes they cut down his old coral tree and asks why they did this to him. He dumps garbage on them. SpongeBob and Patrick sing about shopping and decorating and plenty of snow. They hold mistletoe over Squidward's head. He quickly says he needs to go. The song shows Plankton commenting that people seem more brotherly. Mr. Krabs gives him a fruitcake. Plankton throws it in the trash, which is already full of other fruitcakes. SpongeBob dances with different Christmas backgrounds. He opens Squidward's front door while Squidward tries to work on puzzles. Squidward asks what SpongeBob wants and says he is busy. SpongeBob and Patrick tell him to step outside because they have something for him to see. When Squidward walks outside, he discovers they decorated his entire house with Christmas decorations. He tells them to take the stuff down immediately. Patrick gets launched from a teeter-totter to put a star on top of the coral tree. All the citizens sing about how this Christmas feels like the very first Christmas. Squidward watches from his window window looking unhappy. He gets so angry that he closes the window blind. Patchy the pirate interrupts to ask if Squidward is right about whether there can be Christmas under the sea. When the show returns, Patchy says SpongeBob was sending the last of the letters to Santa. One person hopes Santa can read Portuguese. SpongeBob realizes Squidward has not written his letter yet. He runs to Squidward's house carrying pencils, bottles, and paper. He bursts into Squidward's house and runs upstairs past him. Squidward asks what he is doing. SpongeBob says he will help Squidward get started on his letter. He writes, "Dear Santa Claus," but Squidward tells him to forget it. SpongeBob decides that is too formal and tries "Hi Santa," but Squidward says no. SpongeBob tries "Howdy Claus," but Squidward pushes him out the door. Squidward tells SpongeBob he is not writing a letter to a figment of his imagination. SpongeBob warns that when Santa comes, Squidward will be the only one without a gift. Squidward says he does not believe in Santa Claus. SpongeBob asks him to just write a letter and wants to know what Squidward has to lose. Squidward lists his self-respect, his sanity, and his lunch before closing the door. SpongeBob and a crowd of citizens gather outside trying to get Squidward to come out. They tell him not to be a party pooper. Squidward pokes his head out of his window, now wearing pajamas. He yells that Santa Claus is a big phony and that SpongeBob has fooled everyone. The crowd keeps calling for him to come out. Squidward closes his window and gets in bed, happy that the idiots will stay up all night while he gets a full night's sleep. But singing outside wakes him up. Everyone sings that Santa is coming tonight over and over again. SpongeBob encourages everyone to keep singing until Santa arrives. They sing all through the night. By morning, everyone looks exhausted and tired. They keep singing, but with much less energy. One man named Fred asks where Santa is. SpongeBob says Santa should be there any minute and tries to keep singing. The crowd gets frustrated. Fred thanks SpongeBob for the lies and calls him Mr. Fairytale. He says they should go waste their time somewhere else. Everyone starts to leave. SpongeBob asks where their Christmas spirit went and says Santa is just running late. Patrick tries to help by suggesting Santa probably stopped for a snack because fat guys get hungry. They wait and wait. Eventually, one of the jellyfish jars breaks on SpongeBob's head, and the jellyfish floats away. Patrick says to never trust a genie. He and a snowman walk away together. Squidward wakes up to his alarm going off. He is thrilled that morning came. He grabs a megaphone and goes outside, yelling, "Merry Christmas and ho ho ho." He sees SpongeBob still standing there alone, looking devastated. Squidward asks if he can get a great Christmas photo. He tells SpongeBob to move in a little. He asks SpongeBob to say Santa Claus. SpongeBob whispers the words with an extremely sad face. Squidward takes the picture. Squidward sings his own version of the very first Christmas song, mocking SpongeBob about how this is their first Christmas. A donkey appears on screen making noises during his song. Squidward laughs at SpongeBob and keeps hitting his own butt over and over. SpongeBob finally speaks. He admits that Squidward was right and this is a stupid holiday. He starts crying but takes out a present. He tells Squidward he still wants him to have it. Squidward stops hitting himself and asks what it is. SpongeBob explains it is a present. He made it for Squidward so he would not be left out when Santa came. SpongeBob lifts his head up, still crying hard, and says Santa's name again before breaking down further. Squidward seems unsure how to respond. He stammers and tries to find words. SpongeBob just says "You're welcome" and sadly walks away crying. Squidward looks at the gift. He wonders what it could be. He guesses it might be a jellyfish net, an old Krabby Patty, or SpongeBob's favorite underpants. He opens the present. Inside, he finds what looks like a clarinet. He smells it and confirms it smells like a clarinet too. The clarinet is handcrafted out of driftwood. It even has Squidward's name carved into it. Squidward notices a button that says push. When he pushes it, 3 wooden figures of Squidward holding clarinets pop out and bob up and down. Squidward says this is the greatest gift he has ever gotten. He starts to sniffle. He says he feels like a big jerk. A donkey appears on screen, making noises. Squidward asks himself what he has done to poor SpongeBob. He calls out for SpongeBob, but cannot find him at first. SpongeBob is on a ladder, trying to take down his Christmas decorations. He says he guesses he will not be needing them anymore. He slides down with the lights in his hands. A gray cloud appears above him and starts raining specifically on SpongeBob. Squidward watches from a distance. He feels bad seeing the poor little guy who only wanted to spread a little joy. SpongeBob says he better get the decorations off of Squidward's place. Suddenly, Squidward starts saying "ho ho ho" from somewhere SpongeBob cannot see. SpongeBob looks around confused, asking who is there and asking the voice to show itself. He keeps calling out hello and yoo-hoo, trying to figure out where the voice is coming from. Squidward calls down from his roof, telling SpongeBob he is up there and calling him a dunce. But then Squidward catches himself and changes his tone. He wishes SpongeBob a Merry Christmas and calls him little boy. Squidward has dressed himself up as Santa Claus with a red suit and white beard. SpongeBob gasps. He tries to say the word Santa, but he keeps stuttering on the first letter. He takes deep breaths between attempts but cannot get the full word out. He just keeps saying the S sound over and over. Squidward tells him to take it easy. SpongeBob finally manages to say Santa, but then immediately faints. Squidward climbs down from the roof. He calls out SpongeBob's name 3 times trying to wake him up. SpongeBob keeps trying to say Santa again. Squidward quickly covers his mouth and tells him not to do that again. SpongeBob recovers and says he knew Santa would make it. But then he starts asking questions. He wants to know where Santa's big round belly is. Squidward makes up an excuse, saying it is a result of undersea pressure on his body. SpongeBob asks where the reindeer and flying machine are. Squidward claims he loaned them to the Easter Bunny. SpongeBob comments on Squidward's nose. He pokes it and laughs. He says he knew Santa was supposed to have a big nose, but calls this one gigantic. Squidward gets frustrated and admits he is Santa. SpongeBob jumps onto Squidward and hugs him. He says this is the greatest gift Santa could have given him. He thanks Santa for bringing Christmas to Bikini Bottom. Squidward corrects him. He says he did not bring Christmas to Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob did. SpongeBob asks if he really did. Then he faints again and falls onto Gary's shell. Gary meows. Squidward wishes SpongeBob a Merry Christmas. He seems relieved that the situation is over. But then a little girl approaches, asking if Santa has a present for her. Squidward starts to explain that he is not really Santa. SpongeBob wakes up laughing. He encourages Squidward to go ahead and be Santa Claus. He tells the girl that Santa is real because he made SpongeBob's Christmas wish come true, and Santa will not let her down. Squidward has no choice now. He goes into his house searching for something to give her. He looks around wondering what little girls like. He considers a book of matches, a shaving kit, and a copy of his birth certificate. None of these seem right, he tells himself to think. Finally, he finds something he considers perfect. He comes back out and hands the little girl a wrench. He says, "Ho, ho, ho." The little girl thanks Santa and starts scratching the wrench like it is a puppy. Squidward admits to himself that giving the gift almost felt good. But then he notices something terrible. A long line of citizens has formed. Everyone is waiting for presents. Squidward realizes what he has gotten himself into. One man named Fred asks where his present is. Old Man Walker asks for his. Another person asks what about them. Squidward goes back into his house searching for things to give away. He tells himself to think fast and that he needs gifts for good people. He finds a bowl of mashed potatoes in his house. He gives the bowl to a woman. She thanks Santa and says it is just what she wanted. She puts the bowl on her head as a new hairstyle. Squidward gives the little girl who wanted front teeth 2 forks. She puts them in her mouth like front teeth. He gives Patrick a clock. Patrick punches a hole through the middle of the clock and wears it as a wristwatch. Squidward keeps giving away everything in his house. He gives away all his possessions to the crowd. When everyone finally leaves, Squidward questions what he was thinking. He gave away all his stuff just because SpongeBob would not be sad. He asks himself if he is insane. SpongeBob knocks on the door. Squidward tells him he might as well take the door because it is all that is left. SpongeBob rushes in excited. He tells Squidward he missed Santa. He says Santa was just there exactly like SpongeBob predicted. SpongeBob describes Santa in detail. He was jolly with a beard. His nose was big and he had rosy cheeks. He was friendly and kind. Then SpongeBob corrects himself and mentions Santa's belly was small, but his nose was huge with Christmas joy. He keeps praising Santa to Squidward. Squidward turns SpongeBob around and pushes him out the door as SpongeBob continues talking. Squidward says at least everything is over. Then he notices something on the ground. He picks up a bottle with a letter inside. The letter is addressed to him. It says, "Dear Squidward, thanks for all your help. You've been a real good boy this year. Warm regards, Santa Claus." The letter disappears into thin air. The real Santa Claus appears flying through the water in his sleigh pulled by reindeer. He says, "Ho, ho, ho," and "Merry Christmas." He does a crazy dance while continuing to say, "Ho, ho, ho." Squidward watches in complete shock. He realizes Santa Claus actually exists. He responds very calmly by saying, "Yup, he is insane." He plays the wooden clarinet SpongeBob made for him as the episode ends. Santa flies off screen, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. The episode cuts back to Patchy the Pirate's house. There are puppet versions of SpongeBob and Patrick on a sailboat in front of a picture of an island covered in presents. SpongeBob calls out to Patrick about Christmas Island. Patrick announces Presents Ahoy. SpongeBob says, "Hooray!" Patchy starts making storm sound effects. SpongeBob says, "Uh-oh, there is a storm." Patrick says yay, but then corrects himself to yikes. Patchy makes more sound effects and starts speaking normally. He yells that they are going down. The camera zooms out to reveal the boat is sitting on top of Patchy's head. He shouts commands about trimming sails and hoisting yardarms and turning on the weather channel. Someone off-screen calls his name. Patchy talks to the kids watching. He says SpongeBob makes him as jolly as a Roger. He hopes everyone enjoyed SpongeBob's Christmas tale. He hopes their Christmas is better than sunken treasure. Patchy takes the boat off his head. Potty flies out from underneath the boat. There is a nest with eggs wrapped in bows underneath where Patty was sitting. Patchy picks up an egg and says Patty left him a little Christmas present. He goes over to some mistletoe hanging nearby. He sprays breath freshener in his mouth. He says it is time for somebody to kiss Patchy the pirate. He makes kissing noises and asks who it will be. He laughs and tells people to kiss the captain. Patty flies over squawking. Patchy screams. Patty demands a kiss. Patchy runs away saying no, not Patty. He says they talked about this. Patty keeps chasing him, demanding kisses. The French narrator says Patchy looks pretty busy, so he will say it for him. He wishes everyone good night and happy holidays. The words happy holidays appear on screen as Patty continues demanding a kiss from Patchy. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the next SpongeBob special, Shanghaied. Shanghaied is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants Season 2 that aired on the 9th of March 2001. The episode drew 3.09 million viewers during its original broadcast. What made this episode unique was its interactive format, where viewers could call in or go online to vote for which of 3 different endings they wanted to see. The episode has been shown in different versions over the years, with the original voting format, later rerun versions, and versions without the live-action Patchy segments. The original broadcast opened with live-action segments featuring Patchy the Pirate hosting what he called SpongeBob's You Wish Spectacular Special. The French narrator introduced Patchy as America's favorite pirate with puffier pantaloons than Captain Kidd and fuzzier facial hair than Blackbeard. Patchy appeared at his house in Encino, welcoming viewers to his quarters. He walked to his kitchen explaining that this would be a call-in and vote special where viewers could choose how the cartoon would end using the phone or the internet. Patty the parrot flew in and Patchy introduced him as his less-than-amusing sidekick. When Patchy asked Patty to say hello to the nice people, Patty yelled for help, claiming he was being held against his will. Patchy got angry and Patty flew away. Patchy went looking for Patty, entering what turned out to be a cannon pointing outside the window. Patty laughed while Patchy yelled at him to get him out. The cannon blasted Patchy out of the house. He landed in a neighboring house that sank like a boat. Patchy returned still smoking from the cannon blast. Patchy walked to his desk, which had many phones on it. He explained that this cartoon was different from land-lubbing cartoons because it had not 1, not 2, but 3 different endings. A phone number appeared at the bottom of the screen for viewers to call. Phones started ringing immediately. Patchy picked one up and told people not to call until he said to. He told them to roll the cartoon. More phones kept ringing. Patchy got frustrated telling everyone to be quiet and stop because the ringing was driving him mad. The animated episode began with SpongeBob waking up and looking at his cereal box. He said it was Kelpo with one of 8 essential prizes inside. He checked in the cereal box, but suddenly a giant anchor crashed through his house. SpongeBob yelled "Holy shrimp" and ran outside to Squidward. He called out that the sky had a baby from his cereal box. Squidward poked his head through his window. SpongeBob repeated that the sky had a baby. Squidward looked at the anchor and told SpongeBob that was not a baby but a giant anchor. He told SpongeBob to go away. Patrick came over and told SpongeBob that the sky had a baby. SpongeBob said he knew and asked what they should think about naming it. Patrick started to suggest a name, but Squidward interrupted. He sarcastically told them why they did not go climb the anchor rope, saying he was sure it went somewhere far away. The anchor suddenly crashed into Squidward's house. Squidward blamed them for what happened. SpongeBob and Patrick showed their spotless hands, insisting they did not do it and their hands were clean. Patrick repeated the word clean. Squidward stood on top of his damaged house and announced he was going to get to the bottom of this thing. SpongeBob asked if that would not actually be the top. Squidward looked at SpongeBob and narrowed his eyelids. He started climbing the rope. SpongeBob called for him to wait. Patrick also called out to Squidward. SpongeBob and Patrick started climbing the rope too. The French narrator announced that a few inches later, they reached something. SpongeBob pointed up and said ship. Patrick asked how long SpongeBob was going to stay in his little fantasy world. SpongeBob told him to look at the giant ship above them. A giant green ship appeared. Patrick looked shocked to see he was wrong. Squidward was not fazed at all. Squidward said great, and that now he could finally give this anchor dropper a piece of his mind. SpongeBob expressed concern, saying that ship had a spooky green glow around it. Squidward dismissed this, suggesting it was probably because the good-for-nothing owner was too lazy to clean or drop anchors in the right place. SpongeBob told Squidward to wait. All 3 reached the top of the rope and climbed onto the ship. Squidward immediately asked who owned this crate. He noticed a door that said owner on it and began knocking. He told whoever was inside to come out because he wanted to file a complaint. SpongeBob looked around the ship. He commented that this place seemed familiar. Patrick said he did not know why. SpongeBob said he did not know either, but asked if it just kind of rang a bell. Squidward rang the doorbell. Patrick said yes. SpongeBob said he knew who owned this boat, but just could not place the name. He walked by a barrel that said "Property of the Flying Dutchman" on it. Squidward angrily pounded on the door. The Flying Dutchman suddenly popped out, roaring aggressively. SpongeBob said no, it was not that sound. The Flying Dutchman announced he was the Flying Dutchman. SpongeBob said that was it, then stupidly told Squidward the ship belonged to the Red Baron. The Flying Dutchman asked who was disturbing his lair. SpongeBob obliviously said it was Squidward who wanted to complain. The Flying Dutchman gave an evil look to Squidward, waiting for an answer. Squidward nervously said he did not want to complain. SpongeBob reminded him about all that stuff about the Flying Dutchman having a dirty ship and being lazy. The Flying Dutchman glared angrily at Squidward. Squidward laughed nervously and said he never said that. The Flying Dutchman declared that insulting a man's ship was worse than insulting his mother. SpongeBob said no, wait. It was his mother, Squidward said, was dirty, not his ship. The Flying Dutchman shot fire out his nose, frying up Squidward. Squidward screamed in pain. The Flying Dutchman looked over to SpongeBob and Patrick and told them they were next. SpongeBob and Patrick jumped off the ship, yelling that was a close one. They landed back on the ship. The Flying Dutchman welcomed them back. SpongeBob and Patrick screamed and jumped off the ship again, saying that was a closer one. They landed back on the ship again. The Flying Dutchman welcomed them back once more. SpongeBob and Patrick jumped off the ship a third time. Squidward asked why when they acted up. All they got was the welcome wagon. The Flying Dutchman zapped Squidward again, while SpongeBob and Patrick landed back on the ship. The Flying Dutchman asked if they were going to try that again. Patrick said probably. The Flying Dutchman zapped Squidward with lasers from his eyes. He asked how about now? Patrick started to answer, but Squidward covered Patrick's mouth with his tentacle. He said no, they were not going to try it again. The Flying Dutchman zapped Squidward once more. He told them to listen and took out a ghost rule book. He read that whosoever set foot on the Flying Dutchman's ship, uninvited or otherwise, would become members of his ghostly crew forever. He closed the book, then opened it again, and added ever. He closed it again. Squidward asked if they would be getting business cards. The Flying Dutchman zapped him one last time and yelled silence. He explained they were part of his crew now, and their job was to sail around and frighten people. It would be grueling, mind-numbing, and repetitive, just like daytime television. Squidward told him to listen. He said if the Flying Dutchman thought he was going to spend more than 5 minutes on this dumpster, then he was crazy. The place was disgusting. Squidward held up a green jockstrap. He criticized whoever told the Flying Dutchman that having oil lamps next to hardwood paneling was a good idea. The Flying Dutchman picked up Squidward. Squidward asked what was happening now and if he was going to be shown something. The Flying Dutchman unzipped something in midair. Squidward sarcastically said that was very nice and asked if this was some kind of magic act. The Flying Dutchman tossed Squidward into what he called the Fly of Despair. Squidward screamed as he fell inside. SpongeBob and Patrick watched with horrified expressions. The Flying Dutchman closed the Fly of Despair and asked if anyone else would like to enter it. SpongeBob said terrified that no, they knew their place now. Patrick, also terrified, said they would do anything the Flying Dutchman said. The Flying Dutchman told them for starters they could swab the deck. He handed them a mop and a bucket. SpongeBob looked at the mop and said it was a real, live ghost mop. Patrick said he got a hat. The Flying Dutchman announced they were heading down to Bikini Bottom tonight for a haunting spree, so he wanted the ship to look good and scary. SpongeBob asked if he meant good and scary. Patrick disagreed, thinking the Flying Dutchman meant he wanted it to look so good that it was scary. SpongeBob suggested maybe by looking so scary, you forget that it did not look good. Patrick said he did not get it. The Flying Dutchman cut them off, saying never mind what it meant. He just wanted it to look scary with mold growing on the ceilings and bugs in the sink. SpongeBob asked if he did not want it to look good. The Flying Dutchman yelled at them to get moving. SpongeBob and Patrick started mopping while singing that a sailor's life was a wonderful life. The Flying Dutchman called out that this was quite a night. He told his crew to howl with him so they might set the 7 seas ablaze with fear. He howled like a wolf. SpongeBob bleated like a sheep. Patrick yodeled, saying leedle 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 lee. The Flying Dutchman howled like a wolf again. SpongeBob bleated like a sheep again. Patrick yodeled again with the same leedle 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 lee. The Flying Dutchman tried to howl again, but Patrick cut him off with more off-key yodeling. The Flying Dutchman tried again, but Patrick cut him off. He tried a third time, but Patrick cut him off again. There was a very long and awkward silence. The Flying Dutchman finally said that would do. He told Square One that since Pink One was working the navigation, it was up to SpongeBob to find their first victim. He handed SpongeBob a spyglass and told him to hurry because they were burning moonlight. SpongeBob spun a telescope on the ground and said he found a guy they could scare. The telescope pointed to a big tough guy. The Flying Dutchman stared wide-eyed, then nervously blew on the telescope, spinning it slightly to land on a little kid. The little kid named Billy sang in a sing-song voice that he had 4 biscuits and ate 1, then only had 3. The Flying Dutchman said it did his heart good to see children out after dark. He told Pink One to take them behind those rocks. Patrick announced they were moving behind the rocks. The ship moved through scratching and tearing up the rocky parts of the sea. SpongeBob told Patrick to keep going, saying he was good multiple times, then told him to stop. He assured the captain they would buff out those scratches. The Flying Dutchman said never mind it and told them to jump out when he gave the signal. He scared Billy from behind a rock by yelling boo. Billy screamed. The Flying Dutchman told Billy to prepare to be burdened with the haunting memory of his ghostly ghost pirates. He pointed to SpongeBob and Patrick, who just got confused. SpongeBob asked if that was the signal. He apologized and said to just do it again. The Flying Dutchman repeated his line about the haunting memory of his ghostly ghost pirates. SpongeBob and Patrick came out. SpongeBob did a little trick with his fingers. Patrick asked how he did that. The Flying Dutchman told them to get back on the ship. SpongeBob and Patrick said it was still a mystery. Billy said those guys were dorks. The Flying Dutchman agreed, but said they were his dorks. The scene showed SpongeBob and Patrick steering through the rocks, continuing to tear up the ship. The Flying Dutchman had an annoyed facial expression. SpongeBob kept saying Patrick was good. The Flying Dutchman tried scaring a woman by showing flames in his mouth, but got interrupted when SpongeBob blew bubbles, and Patrick shook a gray board. The ship kept getting wrecked moving through the rocks. The Flying Dutchman kept the same annoyed expression. SpongeBob repeated that Patrick was good. The Flying Dutchman went through a wall to scare Larry, but SpongeBob and Patrick simply slammed on the wall as they tried unsuccessfully to scare Larry. The ship continued getting wrecked through the rocks. The Flying Dutchman maintained his annoyed expression. SpongeBob again said Patrick was good. The Flying Dutchman scared Frank by rotating his head while SpongeBob and Patrick skated in purple tights. Back on the ship, SpongeBob asked Patrick why he thought the Dutchman asked them to wait in their bunk room. Patrick suggested maybe he was going to give them a reward. SpongeBob wondered if it might be movie passes. Patrick excitedly suggested an oversized coffee mug. Both started bouncing insanely. The Flying Dutchman entered and told them he had been thinking. He ordered them to stop bouncing. Both stopped and froze in place instantly. He said this whole crew for eternity thing was not working out. It was not really them so much as it was him. SpongeBob asked if he was setting them free. The Flying Dutchman said actually he was just going to eat them. He told them he would see them at dinner and closed the door. SpongeBob and Patrick screamed. Patrick said he had an idea. SpongeBob asked what it was. Patrick suggested they leave. SpongeBob pointed out the door was locked and the only way out was through the perfume department. He pointed to a live-action room full of perfume and customers. Patrick said they should do it. SpongeBob gulped. They tried to run through the department but got sprayed with all sorts of perfume. Someone removed Patrick's gas mask and sprayed him in the face with perfume. One spray went into SpongeBob's mouth. They exited the department. SpongeBob said, panting, that he always hated going in there. Patrick agreed. SpongeBob heard something strange and told Patrick to listen. The Flying Dutchman was in his room talking to his diary. He wrote that he told them he was going to eat them tomorrow. He made up some of that brown sauce his cousin showed him just for the occasion. He was glad he found his dining sock again. He remembered the last time he lost his dining sock, he could not eat for a whole week. Sometimes he wondered how he would survive if anything should ever happen to it. He noticed his sock was gone and popped out in front of SpongeBob and Patrick. He demanded they give back his sock, saying everyone knew he could not eat without it. SpongeBob refused. The Flying Dutchman said okay then and tried to zap SpongeBob. SpongeBob held up the sock as protection. The Flying Dutchman told him to give it. SpongeBob said no. The sock began to tear. The Flying Dutchman panicked, warning that SpongeBob was stretching out the elastic. Patrick said it would seem they had reached an impasse. The Flying Dutchman agreed. Pink One was right. He offered a deal. If they gave back the sock, he would give them 3 wishes. Patrick said to make it 5. The Flying Dutchman countered with 4. Patrick said 3. Take it or leave it. The Flying Dutchman agreed to 3 wishes. SpongeBob said, wow, 3 wishes. He asked Patrick if that was not great. Patrick said wishes, then immediately said he wished they had known that earlier. The clock went backwards 5 minutes. The Flying Dutchman said, okay, they got 2 wishes left. Patrick smiled with embarrassment at an angry SpongeBob. SpongeBob said, well, they still had 2 more, which was exciting. He said he wished Squidward were here to see this. Squidward was shown screaming as he still fell through the fly of despair in a background full of spaghetti and meatballs. He crashed onto his bed. Squidward said relieved that he was glad all that was over. He disappeared and reappeared on the ship. SpongeBob and Patrick happily said Squidward was back. Squidward looked around, shocked. SpongeBob told him to guess what. The Dutchman gave them 3 wishes. Patrick used the first one, and SpongeBob realized he just used the second one. Squidward said the last one they owed him, because SpongeBob got him back into this mess. Patrick protested, saying he thought it belonged to him. Everyone started to argue. Patrick said he did not really get a real wish, so why should Squidward get a wish? SpongeBob angrily said that was not right. Squidward angrily insisted the wish was his. Their arguing turned into incoherent yelling, babbling, and shouting. The Flying Dutchman told them that was enough. Using his mystic otherworldly powers, he would decide who got the last wish. He used the eeny meeny miny mo method, saying eeny meeny miny mo, catch a sailor by the toe, if he hollers, let him go, my mother told me to pick the very best one, and... At this point in the original broadcast, Patchy returned to announce it was voting time. He explained that viewers would decide how the cartoon ended. They could choose between sassy Squidward, portly Patrick, or good old SpongeBob. The phone number appeared again at the bottom of the screen. Patchy said his trusty crew was eagerly awaiting calls. Potty was shown sleeping against phones. Patchy encouraged everyone to hoist their anchor off the couch and make with the voting. After a commercial break, Patchy announced it was time to announce the winner. The screen read, "Please stand by." Patchy said sorry and that he meant it was time to announce the winner. He blew a horn. But first they would look at the endings. Viewers did not choose. According to their high-tech counterology, viewers did not choose Patrick. An image of Patrick appeared with a skull in front of him. Patchy said they should see what Patrick would have wished for if they picked him. In Patrick's ending, the Flying Dutchman finished his eeny meeny miny mo and stopped on Patrick. SpongeBob told Patrick worriedly that it was his turn to make the wish. Patrick just said, Squidward told Patrick to listen. He did not particularly feel like being trapped there for all eternity. Eternity was a very long time. He demonstrated the length of eternity as if it were a piece of string. Patrick's eyes looked at each end. Squidward asked if he understood. SpongeBob rushed in, saying Patrick had to think harder than he ever thought before. Patrick said, SpongeBob said that was not going to do it and told him to think harder. Patrick thought harder still, just saying, Squidward and SpongeBob simultaneously encouraged him, telling him to put on his thinking cap and come on. They told him, yes, think really hard. Patrick thought intensely. Inside, Patrick's eye was a toaster that ejected a slice of toast. Patrick said okay. He got it. The Flying Dutchman said his wish was granted. Patrick was shown chewing gum. He apologized and grabbed out a pack of gum from his pocket, asking if anyone wanted some. SpongeBob and Squidward were shocked. Squidward asked if he wished for gum. Patrick explained that if they were going to be there forever, they might as well have fresh breath. SpongeBob and Squidward took pieces of gum and chewed some too. The Flying Dutchman appeared with a big belly. The clothes of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward remained on a plate. The three were complaining inside the Flying Dutchman's belly. They begged to be let out and asked for one more wish. The Flying Dutchman simply said, minty. Patchy commented that Patrick shivered his timbers right down to his peg leg. He said viewers were right not to pick that one because it seemed like nonsense and malarkey. He said they should look at the other loser. An image of Squidward appeared with a skull in front of him. Patchy said it appeared viewers did not vote for Squidward. He said he did not blame them and would not have either, but they should see what would have happened if the Dutchman's finger landed on Squidward. In Squidward's ending, the Flying Dutchman stopped on Squidward. SpongeBob told Squidward he got a wish. A great big wish. Squidward said that was right and asked if they knew what he wished. Patrick said no. Squidward said he wished he had never met those two barnacle heads before in his entire life. The Flying Dutchman said, so be it. A magic cloud surrounded them before granting the wish. Squidward found himself right next to SpongeBob and Patrick, who magically did not know who he was. SpongeBob introduced himself and his associate Patrick. Patrick said, hi. Squidward told the Flying Dutchman that was not what he meant. The Flying Dutchman said, well, now that introductions were out of the way, it was time for dinner. He grabbed out a metal knife and fork. The Flying Dutchman appeared with a big belly. The clothes remained on a plate. Inside the Flying Dutchman's belly, SpongeBob asked what Squidward said his name was. Squidward said he was Squidward and he was their neighbor. SpongeBob said, oh, nice to meet him, trying to pronounce Squidward correctly. He said they would have plenty of time to get to know each other. He laughed. Patchy announced it was time for the moment everyone was waiting for. He told viewers to get ready to blow milk out of their noses because it was time to announce the winner. He asked for the envelope from Potty and thanked his fine feathered assistant. The winner was SpongeBob. A flag appeared with SpongeBob and the word winner on it. Patchy sniffed the air and asked Potty if he smelled something. He noticed the fuse in Potty's head and said he told Potty they were not doing that stunt. Potty squawked that he did not get the memo. Potty blew up along with Patchy. Patchy coughed up a feather and recovered from the blast. He announced the most requested ending. In SpongeBob's ending, the Flying Dutchman stopped on SpongeBob. Squidward told SpongeBob to think. They were about to get eaten. What could he wish for to make it so they did not get eaten? SpongeBob said not to worry because he had it all figured out. The Dutchman would not be able to eat them because he wished that the Dutchman was a vegetarian. The Flying Dutchman, who initially held a fork and knife, turned into a vegetarian. He looked fit and healthy and bit off some celery. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward reappeared in front of SpongeBob's house, but only their heads could be seen. They all said hooray! SpongeBob said they were home. Patrick said SpongeBob did it and they were safe. Suddenly, the screen revealed their bodies had been turned into fruits. Squidward's body was a banana, SpongeBob's was a strawberry, and Patrick's was a bunch of grapes. They were all in a blender filled with other fruits. Squidward asked why they had been turned into fruits. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward saw the Flying Dutchman chopping slices of banana into the blender. The Flying Dutchman said, "Hey, he got a wish too. Fruit prevents scurvy." He whistled. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward screamed and bounced away in the blender. The Flying Dutchman said, "Hey, get back here with that." He laughed, saying he would get them. He chased them around the ship, which was now a hippie-themed vehicle with a main mast. Patchy sat at the couch crying. He said, "Hold on," and blew his nose. He apologized to the kids, saying old Patchy could not help but get choked up at the end of a show. The good news was, when viewers watched this cartoon the normal way like usual, it would have the ending they picked. So now they were official, big-time cartoon decision-makers. He told them not to let it go to their head. He told Potty to say goodnight to the folks. Potty squawked that he quit. Patchy growled and said that was it. Right now, he had some employee management to take care of. He called out for Potty to get in his nice cage. Potty squawked that he did not think so. The French narrator said while they argued that this concluded SpongeBob's You Wish Spectacular special and thanked viewers for voting. The words "thanks for voting" appeared on screen. Patchy yelled, "Ow!" In later rerun versions and home media releases, the episode was presented differently. Patchy introduced it as Patchy's Pick, rather than a voting special. He showed a large cue card with the title Shanghaied on it. After the episode, Patchy would open fan mail instead of announcing voting results. The episode defaulted to showing SpongeBob's ending since that was the winner of the original vote. Some versions of the episode aired without any Patchy segments at all, going straight into the animated story. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Ugh. Ugh is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3 that aired on the 5th of March 2004. The episode drew 5.96 million viewers during its original broadcast. The special is also known as SpongeBob SquarePants B.C., standing for Before Comedy. The episode takes place in prehistoric times and features caveman ancestors of SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward discovering fire for the first time. The episode opens with the French narrator introducing the special. The screen pans across live-action houses of California. The narrator announces it is time for another SpongeBob SquarePants special, but this is not an ordinary special. The scene cuts to outside a house in Encino, California. The narrator says they are going back to Encino, as it was 100 million years ago. Lightning flashes and the houses are replaced by caves. The scene becomes smoggy with loads of plants and trees and a volcano in the distance. The narrator tells viewers to prepare themselves for SpongeBob SquarePants B.C. Stone, text drops reading, Before Comedy. The narrator introduces Patchy the Pirate as the host. An audience cheers and applauds. The scene zooms inside a stone house. Inside are all the creature comforts of a normal home but changed to look primitive. Patchy enters wearing leopard garb and riding a papier-mâché dinosaur. He says yeehaw and greets the kids. He acknowledges they are probably wondering what he is doing in a cave. He grumbles to himself while explaining. The dinosaur walks over to a wall with cave drawings of a sponge and jellyfish. Patchy explains that today's SpongeBob takes place in prehistoric times. He says this was back when man struggled for survival. The drawings show a dinosaur eating a caveman version of Patrick while the sponge caveman runs away. Patchy says dinosaurs ruled the earth. He asks his dinosaur Bronte if that is right, then laughs saying he is riding the dinosaur now. The camera pans out to reveal Patchy is wearing the dinosaur like an inner tube. Patchy struggles to get out of it. He says it is stuck. He falls over on his side and screams for help. Two stagehands run over to him. The screen cuts to a "Please stand by" message. When the show returns, Patchy is standing without the dinosaur. He continues saying that prehistoric times were the greatest. Black and white footage of cavemen appears. Patchy says it was a simpler time with simpler pleasures. A picture shows a caveman with a finger up his nose. Patchy holds up two robes that are identical to each other and the one he is wearing. He says your clothes always matched. He picks up a paintbrush and says you could draw on the walls and nobody would yell at you. He picks up a giant club and says it was much easier to hit a baseball. He sits down on the couch saying prehistoric times were the best. Patchy gasps and asks the kids if those are pterodactyl wings he hears flapping. He says he thinks he knows who that is. He welcomes the pottydactyl. Potty flies in but has a head visor and jetpack on. Patchy squawks that he is sorry he is late. Patchy asks why Patchy is not wearing his costume. He picks up a pterodactyl costume, saying he stayed up all night making it. Patchy squawks that Patchy is wasting his time and that prehistoric stuff is lame. Patchy says everybody knows the future is where it is at. Patchy laughs nervously and says that is not true. He tells folks not to mind Patchy. He says even SpongeBob SquarePants knows that prehistoric stuff is what the kids say cool. Patchy squawks that no, he does not. Patchy says yes, he does. Patchy says nope. Patchy says he most certainly does. They continue arguing back and forth, with Patchy getting increasingly frustrated and angry. The French narrator says meanwhile. The scene cuts to SpongeBob at the grill looking nervous. Mr. Krabs bursts in asking what is wrong. SpongeBob says he does not know, but he has the strangest feeling that somewhere a pirate and parrot are arguing about him. A close-up shows SpongeBob saying, and the parrot is winning. The scene cuts back to Patchy and Patchy still arguing. Patchy says does, while Patchy says doesn't multiple times. Patchy tells viewers that while they are arguing, why don't the folks go ahead and watch some prehistoric SpongeBob? He tells them to roll the cartoon. He adds does one more time. Patchy says doesn't. Patchy fumes. The opening title screens appear, which are now gray with fossils instead of the usual blue with plants and shells. The episode starts showing the Bikini Atoll Island. This time, it is a prehistoric island with murky water and foggy skies. A pterodactyl flies over the island. The French narrator says dawn breaks over the primordial sea. The scene submerges into the prehistoric Pacific Ocean to see a muddy swamp. The narrator explains it is here that millions of years ago, life began taking its first clumsy steps out of the darkness, opening its newly formed eyeballs to stare into the blinding light of intelligence. He starts to continue, but stops himself, saying, "Never mind, this happened a long time ago." The scene pans over to prehistoric Conch Street. 3 houses appear similar to SpongeBob's Pineapple, Patrick's Rock, and Squidward's Easter Island head. SpongeBob's house has a fern growing out of the top. Squidward's house looks more like a monkey-shaped head. Patrick's Rock has no bamboo weather vane. These are prehistoric homes to the 3 characters' cavemen ancestors. Inside Caveman SpongeBob's house, it is one large, empty room with cave drawings of him jellyfishing on the walls. Rocks and bones sit on a shelf above his blanket where he sleeps. Outside, a giant purple dinosaur fish wakes up under a beam of sunlight. It gurgles out a call similar to SpongeBob's foghorn alarm clock. The sound waves cause a rock to rattle off a shelf. It falls on the prehistoric sponge's head. Alarmed, the caveman sponge shrieks but calms down when he notices the rock. He laughs and shoves the rock back on the shelf. He takes his hide blanket from the floor and puts it on as a pair of caveman pants. He puts one arm through a sleeve and walks outside his pineapple, dragging a vine behind him. The caveman SpongeBob says Benuga ready, then says Tabonga to Gary. Prehistoric Gary meows. The caveman SpongeBob, whose name is Spongegar, says Gary, then Tabonga again. Spongegar walks into the clearing with the vine. The vine turns out to be a leash, and he is walking a dino snail version of Gary. Prehistoric Gary meows and leaves behind a long trail of slime. Spongegar and Gary walk past the primitive tiki lair that holds prehistoric Squidward. The caveman Squidward, whose name is Squog, looks out the window to see a path of blue slime on his path. Squog makes an angry sound. He is about to walk outside but stops. Squog speaks in clear English, saying, "Wait a minute." He imagines himself babbling in anger at prehistoric Gary. In his imagination, prehistoric Gary uses his eyes to smash him into a splattered octopus. Squog raises himself, but prehistoric Gary simply smashes him some more, then jumps over his crushed body and slithers away. Squog says, and runs over to pick up 2 clubs. He debates with himself over which one to use. He takes the bigger one and walks out chuckling. The club left behind cries. Squog approaches Spongegar and Gary, who are out in the clearing. Squog calls out to Spongegar, speaking in caveman language. He says Manaka and no Tabonga Gary Puga. Prehistoric Gary rolls his eyes and slithers away. Squog displays a small pile of snail slime and points to his front walkway covered in the snail goop. Squog continues speaking caveman language, saying Tabonga multiple times, including Tabonga do. Spongegar repeats Tabonga do questioningly and ponders what it means. Squog fumes and stamps off, but slips on the snail slime. He slides as if on a slip and slide, screaming for Spongegar's help. Spongegar is too busy pondering the meaning of Squog's demand. Squog slams into caveman Patrick's rock, which opens. This reveals Patrick's ancestors sticking to the underside of it, as Patrick often does. The caveman Patrick, whose name is Patar, announces his name. Patar walks over to Squog, who is covered in snail slime but not sliding any longer. Patar says, then yuck. He sniffs his slime coating and says, bleck. He tastes some of the slime cautiously and says, bleck again. Patar takes out a salt shaker and adds some salt to the slime. He tastes it again. This time it appears somewhat palatable. He is satisfied and gives 2 thumbs up. Patar says, Mwanga. Squog gets angry and shakes the slime off himself. Squog says Patar, then makes an angry sound. Patar says Squog, then laughs and hugs him. Patar says he loves Squog in caveman language. Patar squeezes Squog so tightly that the veins in his arms pop out. Squog is slightly strangled. Patar says Squog's name. Squog gets strangled even harder and makes a squeaking sound. Patar says Squog again. SpongeGar notices Patar and calls his name. Patar sees him and lets go of Squog. Squog passes out onto the ground. The two run up to each other. Patar says SpongeGar's name. SpongeGar smiles and hits himself on the head. Patar smiles and punches himself in the face a couple times. SpongeGar pulls out his nose and lets it go, slamming it back into his face. He screams, then stops when his nose comes out of his face and smiles. Patar pulls his lower lip over his head and it tears off. He screams, then smiles. Patar says SpongeGar. SpongeGar says Patar. Squog makes a dismissive sound. Patar and SpongeGar hug. Squog speaks in caveman language, saying SpongeGar and Patar have no intelligence. He laughs and says Palinka. Squog is about to walk home again when he slips on the slime trail. He slides for a moment longer before sliding into his clay monkey head house. He crashes into the back wall where cave paintings of hunters with arrows point at his exposed rear. He speaks muffled. Back in the sand field across from the row of homes, SpongeGar reaches into his pants and pulls out half of a coconut shell with juice inside. He howls in glee. Patar sniffs it. SpongeGar gets a log and pours the liquid into it. He blows into a hollow branch sticking out of the top of the log. This produces a bubble in a hole on the other side of the log. Patar tries to take cover from the bubble. He sees it pop and realizes it is harmless. He realizes there is no need to protect himself from it. He claps and howls in delight. Clouds appear and it begins to rain. Patar claps again and the rain stops. The clouds relocate themselves. Patar smiles. SpongeGar tries his hand at it, but the rain stalls. A few moments later, the clouds reappear and it rains. Both cheer. Patar claps and the rain ceases once more. The two get excited and clap excessively. The rain begins but will not stop. Thunder sounds and the two stop their howling. Patar claps again, but lightning flashes, causing the two to panic. Squog watches them from the second-story window in his house. Squog speaks caveman language about Patar and SpongeGar. He starts to paint when thunder sounds. Lightning strikes the log. Squog looks out his window and gasps to see that the bubble-blowing log has been ignited in flames. Patar and SpongeGar have been injured by the lightning. Squog calls out Patar and SpongeGar's names. Both get up and run behind a rock, startled. They peek out from behind it to see the fire. SpongeGar, Squog, and Patar slowly approach it while quaking. Squog sniffs it and sticks his hand into it. His hand burns and he takes it out and screams in pain. He sucks his hand afterwards. SpongeGar and Patar put their hands in. Both make questioning and thinking sounds, then say ah. Suddenly, both scream and flail their charred hands in pain. Patar sniffs his hand and recoils from it. He adds salt and gnaws on his hand. He growls and crawls away thinking that SpongeGar and Squog will eat it. He gnaws his hand away from SpongeGar and Squog. They do not want it, but they slurp and lick because they are hungry. SpongeGar sees two plants and says Fongar. As SpongeGar runs over to get the plants, Squog calls him a protozoa in caveman language, saying manga. SpongeGar is walking back when he trips and the plants fly into the fire. Squog says SpongeGar's name and angrily speaks gibberish. When he is done, he turns to see that Patar is salting his burnt hand. When Patar goes to take a bite of Squog's hand, Squog smashes his head in with a stick. Squog says Patar, then Chonga. Patar crawls away disappointedly. SpongeGar stares at Squog's stick, then the two plants in the fire, then the stick again, then the plants, back and forth. Mystical music plays as he looks at the two faster and faster. 4 live-action singers in barbershop garb and mustaches appear briefly. SpongeGar gets an idea and says, aha. He calls to Squog and motions towards the stick, saying, Tuka, SpongeGar questioningly. Squog nods happily and hits SpongeGar on the head with the stick. SpongeGar says, nah, multiple times. SpongeGar slowly impales one of the plants with the stick. He sniffs it and then eats it. He begins jumping up and down in delight, hooting. Apparently it tasted good. Squog watches him. SpongeGar offers the other plant to Squog, who hesitantly takes it and eats it. Squog says yumma and hoots while jumping up and down as SpongeGar watches. He and SpongeGar shake hands. Squog says Taylor Fu to SpongeGar twice. A speech bubble with Albert Einstein's face appears as Squog speaks more caveman language. Later, SpongeGar, Patar, and Squog have a cookout. SpongeGar sticks a marshmallow-like plant through the stick and roasts it in the fire and eats it. Squog does the same with a piece of coral. Patar toasts a stick and eats it, puncturing his lips. SpongeGar says Patar, then and tells him to watch SpongeGar in caveman language. Mr. Crab's ancestor scuttles by saying money repeatedly and ooga booga. SpongeGar stomps on him. The prehistoric crabs says Ogg. SpongeGar takes Patar's stick and impales prehistoric crabs. Patar takes the stick, puts it in the fire, and then eats it. He burps. The three jump up and down, hooting and hollering. The scene freezes. The French narrator says, "Hooray!" It looks like the prehistoric pals have just discovered fire, but they will soon learn that when you play with fire, you may get burned. He tells viewers to stay tuned. The scene cuts back to Patchy, who is laughing hysterically. Patchy says he told everyone prehistoric times were fun. He asks how about he teaches the kids how a caveman makes a fire with 2 sticks. He holds up 2 sticks and rubs them together. He says it does not get any cooler than that, and to chalk one up for Patchy. An eye is chalked up on the wall below a sign reading prehistory. Patchy keeps rubbing and panting. Nothing is happening, and he eventually gives up. He says he guesses this is a type of wood that does not burn. A laser shoots through and lights the 2 sticks on fire, startling Patchy. Patchy says Potty's name in an annoyed tone. Potty is shown with a laser cannon on his back. Potty squawks about laser technology and says to score 1 for the future. The scene shows a digital screen next to the prehistory chalk labeled the future. The score goes from 0 to 1. Patchy says he has something Potty will never find in his little future. He says a real live caveman. A real life caveman walks in from behind very slowly. Patchy tells him to come on in. Patchy explains to kids that he found the caveman frozen in a block of ice. He spent 3 days thawing him out with his mom's hairdryer. He calls him Cavey. The caveman approaches the camera and recoils in horror. Patchy chuckles and says, "Isn't he something?" He tells Cavey it is okay. Another eye is chalked up for prehistory. Potty says that is nothing and tells the old-timer to make way for the future. A door swings up and a robot enters the room. The robot greets everyone saying it is the X29488 and asks how it may serve. The future score goes from 1 to 2. Patchy asks where Potty keeps getting all this stuff. Potty says, "Never you mind," and squawks. Potty says they should go see what Cavey thinks. Cavey slowly approaches the robot and touches it. The robot's eyes start flashing red. A siren goes off. The robot says attack repeatedly. Cavey starts to run off and the robot gives slow chase, shooting lasers at him. For every shot, the future score keeps going up. Patchy says Potty is ruining his caveman show. The robot continues saying attack and shooting lasers. The scene cuts to the exterior, which is rumbling. The French narrator asks if Patchy will ever get control of the special. The scene cuts to SpongeGar mesmerized by the fire. The narrator asks what SpongeBob will do with fire. He tells viewers to stay tuned to SpongeBob SquarePants, B, C, and find out. The screen fades to black for a commercial break. The scene returns to Patchy's cave house, still rumbling. The French narrator welcomes viewers back to SpongeBob SquarePants B, C. He says it sounds like things have gone from bad to worse for Patchy. Inside the cave, the robot is still firing lasers. Cavey throws a giant rock at the robot. Patchy is huddled behind the couch. Potty watches with a soda and popcorn. Potty squawks that this is great. Patchy greets viewers saying he is glad they are back. He ducks a laser. He says they should watch the rest of SpongeBob B, C. While he gets things straightened out around here, he says whoa and ducks as a giant rock falls on him. He comes up dazed, saying, or maybe not. He collapses. The scene cuts back to the freeze frame of SpongeGar, Patar, and Squog. The French narrator says when they last saw the hungry troglodytes, they just discovered fire. He asks how long it will take for them to mess it up. The scene continues as SpongeGar, Patar, and Squog continue to jump up and down hooting. They all run off. SpongeGar impales some long grass, toasts them, and eats them. Squog impales some primitive flowers and leaves, toasts them, and takes a bite out of them. Patar impales his loincloth, toasts that, and eats it. He burps up a charred piece and wipes his mouth with it, then eats it. The three continue to find things to eat. SpongeGar twirls up some vines on the stick, toasts it, and slurps it up. Squog puts some rocks in a pan and toasts it. It becomes popcorn. He eats some. Patar lifts up a rock. A bunch of prehistoric crabs all yelling money crawl out. Patar drools. SpongeGar draws a circle in the sand, impales it, and lifts it, revealing a sand crabby patty. He toasts it. The scene cuts to the three chewing vigorously. They all continue to eat and they burp. Squog says balapa. Soon Squog, SpongeGar, and Patar continue to run off, get something, toast it, and eat it over and over again. Eventually, they are on the ground now, much fatter and satisfied. They all yawn and get up. Squog says Ganoga to Patar and Ganoga to SpongeGar. Patar says Ganoga to Squog and Ganoga to SpongeGar. SpongeGar says Ganoga to Squog and Ganoga to Patar. The three walk back to their houses but then halt. The three turn and look at the fire. Squog runs over and picks up the fire. SpongeGar says no Squog fire in caveman language and that SpongeGar wants the fire. Squog says SpongeGar is stupid in caveman language. SpongeGar shoves Squog. Squog is shocked and sets the log down. He shoves SpongeGar back for revenge. SpongeGar shoves Squog. Squog whacks him with his club. SpongeGar hits Squog with his own club. The two continue to whack each other with clubs while Patar retrieves the fire. He hoots excitedly as he runs back to his rock. Patar looks behind him to see if Squog and SpongeGar have caught up. He turns to see SpongeGar and Squog in front of him. Both say Patar. Patar screams, throwing the log into the air where it stays. Squog is about to catch it when SpongeGar jumps on Squog's head and takes it instead. Squog makes an angry sound. SpongeGar runs off with the log, but Patar takes it, then Squog takes it, then SpongeGar takes Squog by mistake. SpongeGar chuckles nervously when Squog gives him an angry look. Patar takes the log, then Squog again, who is swinging on a vine. Squog smashes face first into a tree. The log is taken by SpongeGar, while Squog's unconscious body slides from the tree to the ground. Squog falls into a trap Patar made and Patar grabs the log while it is floating. Patar screams in fear when he sees a picture of a monster held up by Squog. Squog says Patar is dumb in caveman language and that the fire is Squog's. He picks up the log, then runs back to his house. He searches for the key in his pocket. He gets it but realizes that the log is gone. He says, "Aha!" then makes a questioning sound, then an angry sound. Squog sees SpongeGar running away with it, but SpongeGar falls victim of another Patar trap and drops the log. Patar grabs it and runs off happily. SpongeGar calls to Patar in caveman language. The vine snaps, causing SpongeGar to fall. Patar says the fire is his in caveman language. Squog brings his 4 tentacles out, causing Patar to trip. The log flies off. Squog chuckles and runs after the log as it rolls away. Patar joins Squog and they all chase the log again. Squog says, the fire is his repeatedly in caveman language. Patar says the fire is his. SpongeGar says the fire is his. The 3 chase it up a cliff, but the log rolls back down and it chases them. All 3 say the fire is going away, in caveman language. They trip over a vine and the log rolls over them. They continue chasing the log. When it stops rolling, they all tug on it. SpongeGar says the fire is his. Squog says the fire is his. Patar says the fire is his. The fire is suddenly extinguished by more rain. They all sit on the ground. SpongeGar says Patar questioningly. Patar says SpongeGar questioningly. SpongeGar says oh Patar. Patar says oh SpongeGar. SpongeGar and Patar hug and cry. Squog speaks angrily in caveman language. He pulls out his club but is struck by lightning. He falls to the ground and gets black and charred. He speaks weakly in caveman language. SpongeGar and Patar roast marshmallows over Squog. The French narrator says perhaps certain events in history are better left untold. The scene cuts back to Patchy, sitting depressed on his front step. Patchy says now he knows how Squidward feels. Potty comes in to see Patchy. Potty squawks, asking why the long face. Patchy says he thinks Potty knows perfectly well. He calls Potty a little winged vermin. Patchy says all he wanted was to show the nice people how great the cavemen were, but all they got was technology-induced chaos. Potty tells him to come back inside, saying he will be pleasantly surprised. Patchy asks if Potty got rid of the robot android cyborg. Potty says nope, even better. Patchy and Potty arrive inside the cave. Patchy tells Potty he guesses he really misjudged him. He looks and says, what the? Cavey is at a drum set, and the robot is DJing as strobe lights go off. The robot sings When Worlds Collide. Potty says, pretty sweet. The robot sings You Can Run. Cavey sings but no can hide. The robot and Cavey perform a song together about When Worlds Collide. The robot sings about laughing so hard you will swear you died. They sing about holding hands and being a guide. The robot sings to buckle up for the sweetest ride and prepare to have your mind blown wide. Potty says yo and to check it out. Cavey sings that when worlds collide, it is a curious thing. He sings you never heard a robot and a caveman sing. Cavey sings that the robot has working parts in his metal chest and asks how that is different from his beating heart. The robot sings he is from the future. Cavey sings he is from the past. The robot sings that does not mean this friendship was not built to last. Cavey sings he was made in a lab and Cavey was born in a cave. He tells everyone to holler for this inter-era rave. Squidward says future. Potty says word. A character called Spongetron says he is Spongetron. The robot sings You Can Run. Cavey sings but no can hide. The robot sings When Worlds Collide. Patchy shuts his mouth with his hook. The lighting returns to normal. Patchy tells Potty he guesses Potty was right. The future is cool. Potty says just to show there are no hard feelings, he got Patchy a present from the prehistoric times. Patchy asks what it is. He wonders if it is a new loincloth. Potty says no. Patchy asks if it is an enlarged forehead. Potty says no and flies off. Patchy asks what it is. Potty opens the door, revealing Patchy's present, which is a T-Rex. The T-Rex growls at him. Patchy's eyes bug out as he screams. Patchy runs out and his present gives chase. Patchy yells Potty's name and continues screaming as he runs off. Patty watches from the window with popcorn and a soda. Patty squawks that this is great and eats popcorn. The T-Rex grabs Patchy, who screams. Patchy is on his side with his feet inside the T-Rex's jaws. Patchy thanks everyone for watching SpongeBob B.C. and waves goodbye. He yells in pain and starts laughing. He says now the T-Rex is tickling. He laughs again. He tells the rascal to cut it out. He starts guffawing and the episode ends. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to The Sponge Who Could Fly, the lost episode. The Sponge Who Could Fly is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants Season 3 that aired on the 21st of March 2003. The episode drew 7.64 million viewers during its original broadcast. The special is also known as The Lost Episode. The episode features extensive live-action segments with Patchy the Pirate searching for a supposedly lost SpongeBob episode, along with the main animated story about SpongeBob's attempts to achieve flight. The episode opens in front of Nickelodeon Animation Studios in Burbank, California, where a security guard stands by the gate. The French narrator announces that last week, a never-before-seen episode of SpongeBob SquarePants was discovered under a desk at Nickelodeon Studios. Black and white footage of a large crowd of excited people appears. The narrator says all the world is waiting in fevered anticipation to watch the SpongeBob SquarePants Lost episode. An aerial shot of the town of Encino appears. The narrator introduces Patchy the Pirate as the president of the SpongeBob SquarePants fan club, who will present the lost episode from Encino, California. Inside his house, Patchy is inside the shower humming. Patty flies up. Patty tells Patchy the kids are here and flushes the toilet. Patchy yells hot repeatedly and opens the curtain in panic. He asks Patty if he knows this is Patchy's private time. He looks at the camera and says, "Oh, hello." He covers himself with the curtain and asks what everyone is doing there. Patty says they are here to see the lost episode and squawks. Patchy says but he has not got the lost episode because he lost it. He breaks down sobbing. Children off-screen say no Patchy please and not to say that. Patchy says but it is true. It is lost and he has no idea where it is, so it is best if everyone forgets all about old SpongeBob. He shuts the curtain and wails. The scene cuts to a montage called Remembering SpongeBob, showing clips from various episodes. SpongeBob walks into the kitchen of the Krusty Krab from the episode as seen on TV. He brings a bubble wand around town from Bubble Stand. He puts a mustard checkmark on a Krabby Patty, then puts it down on a bun from the Chaperone. He struggles with his long legs also from the Chaperone. He separates into two pieces, then joins back together from Pizza Delivery. He stands motionless in awe also from as seen on TV. He struggles lifting up a bar with two teddy bears attached from Help Wanted. He skips outside tossing hearts in the air from Valentine's Day. He goes for a blue jellyfish, but winds up catching himself in his net from Tea at the Treedome. He surfs backwards with his pants ripped, then wipes out from ripped pants. He dodges a karate chop from Sandy from Karate Choppers. He smokes a bubble pipe from Grandma's Kisses. He sheds a layer of his skin from F-U-N. He floats around a boat completely inflated from Pizza Delivery. He sends a message in a bubble from Naughty Nautical Neighbors. A muscular version of him chases a jellyfish from Muscle Bob Buff Pants. He lies in bed next to Squidward from Home Sweet Pineapple. He scrubs the inside of his head, also from the Chaperone. He clenches onto Mrs. Puff from Boating School. He rocks out from Band Geeks. He plucks his eyebrows yet again from the Chaperone. He sucks on a table from Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. He shrinks on the stove from Nature Pants. He does a karate dance also from Karate Choppers. He blows the sand off Squidward from Reef Blower. He wiggles around also from F-U-N. Lastly, he gets shut out by Squidward from the paper. An audience applauds. The scene cuts back to Patchy, who is sitting on the couch. Patchy says he cannot believe he lost the lost episode. He screws in his peg leg, saying he never loses anything. Patty asks, what about his leg? Patchy says, well, yeah, but... Patty says, and his eye. Patchy says, well, the eye. Patty says, and his hand. Patchy says, and the... Then tells Patty to get out of here and calls him a blasted bird. He shoos Patty away. Patchy says if only he had a map to tell him where the lost episode is. A screeching car sounds and a brick flies through the window and hits Patchy. Patchy mutters gibberish and then falls over. Patty asks what it is and squawks. Patchy says, hey, it is a map. It is a map to the lost episode of SpongeBob he lost. Patty says it is a dream come true. Patchy giggles and says they have to go find it. He shouts excitedly and runs over to the door. He snaps and says, oh, first, he will need his treasure hunting leg. He grabs a black boot out of a bin of umbrellas and screws it on his wooden leg while limping out the door. It now functions like a normal leg. He tells Patty to come on and says time is wasting. He runs down the steps, along with Patty, who squawks. An elderly woman named Mrs. Johnson sits on her porch knitting. Patchy says 10 paces past Mrs. Johnson's house. He walks past the woman's house. Mrs. Johnson asks if the boys would like some cookies. Patchy tells her to put them in a doggy bag, saying he cannot right now because they are on a treasure hunt. He continues walking. Mrs. Johnson says okay, and tells him not to catch cold. Patchy says to walk 5 fathoms past Don's import store and delicatessen. He looks up at a store by that name. He walks next to a tree and says half a league to the forked tree. He looks up at a tree with plastic forks hanging on the leaves. He says oh, and stands somewhere else looking at the map. He says now all that is left is, then stops confused. He asks about the 7 trials of Monkey Lagoon. He lowers the map and sees a playground full of children. He says merciful Neptune, only for SpongeBob. He repeats only for SpongeBob and runs into the playground. He rides back and forth on a small green spring horse and yells whoa. He goes up and down on a seesaw saying whoa repeatedly. He slides slowly down a slide with his hands up. He cheers and rolls onto the ground saying ow. He gets spun around on a merry-go-round while yelling. He then slowly climbs across the monkey bars while a little kid urges him on. Despite Patchy being too tall to hang from the ground, he makes strained sounds. He is shown inside a giant eye-shaped climbing frame while a group of kids surround him. Finally, he cries out while he gets pushed on the swing by a little girl. He screams as the swing returns with only his hook attached to it. The little girl stares at it confused. The scene cuts to Patchy digging in the sand. Patchy says they made it. They survived the trials. He says he is really going to dig this lost episode. He laughs and asks if they get it, saying dig it. He laughs devilishly. Potty is covered in sand and says Patchy stinks. Patchy says he just got out of the shower. He laughs again and sticks his shovel in the ground. He hits something. He tells Potty he thinks he hit something. The camera zooms out, showing a large treasure chest sitting in the sand. Patchy says clever, burying treasure above the surface. Potty squawks. Patchy opens the chest and a golden glow shines from it. He says, this is it. A man in a miner's hat sits in the chest holding a VHS tape. Patchy takes it. The man cups his hands. Patchy says he does not know what it means either, and slams the top of the chest on the man. He says but he got what he came for. He tells Potty to come on because time is wasting. He runs off, jumping around and shouting excitedly again. He runs into his house, still excited, and holds the VHS tape up, saying, yeah. He says popcorn and slams a bag of popcorn down on the table. He says soda and puts a cup of soda on the table. He says pickled garlic and puts a jar of pickled garlic down on the table next to the other things. He runs and sits down. He tells Potty to hurry and hit the remote. Potty drops an egg that hits the remote and squawks. The VCR turns on. Patchy grabs the popcorn and says this is going to be great. A countdown starting at 10 appears on the screen. Patchy says he cannot believe it. More SpongeBob. He starts eating the popcorn. The countdown makes its way down to 5. Patchy says this is so exciting. He laughs while shaking the popcorn, which flies everywhere. The countdown ends. Patchy says, here it comes. Potty squawks and tells him to pipe down. A segment called Walk Cycles begins on the TV screen. SpongeBob is walking down the road while techno music plays in the background. His body squishes up, then returns to normal. Then his body extends and his arms flail around. He returns to normal, then squishes up 3 times, shrinking smaller and smaller in synchronization with the music. He extends his body again. Once again, he squishes up smaller and smaller in synchronization with the music. He extends his body again. He starts running frantically while sweating and looking left to right. He extends his body this time, with his tongue sticking out and flailing around. He begins frantically running again. His limbs and body separate and his eyes pop out of his head. He begins walking normally again. Walk Cycles ends. Color bars appear on the TV along with a beeping noise. Patchy and Potty stare blankly for a moment. Patchy asks if that is it. He asks if that is the lost episode. He says that was just a bunch of cheap walk cycles. Potty says what a rip. Patchy growls. His face turns red and smoke steams out of his ears. He furiously yells that SpongeBob betrayed them. He wails and runs over to a wall of framed SpongeBob pictures. He begins tearing them off the wall, saying he is sorry he ever started this stupid fan club in the first place. He enters his SpongeBob merchandise-filled room and starts throwing things everywhere. He says he has to get rid of all his SpongeBob stuff. All of it repeatedly. He rips his SpongeBob boxers out of his pants, saying all of it. He runs to the door, saying he has to run away. That is what he will do, run away. He cries and runs out the door. Potty says, geez, what a hothead. An announcer on TV says, and now the real lost episode. Another countdown has started at 23 seconds with the words, SpongeBob SquarePants episode 118, the real lost episode. Potty squawks, telling Patchy to come back because there is more. Patchy opens the door with excitement, asking, really? He shuts the door, then re-enters again, quickly reversing what he did earlier to get his SpongeBob stuff back. He sits back down saying, "Hooray," and they should watch. The Sponge Who Could Fly title card appears. Opening credits also appear soon after. The episode opens up in jellyfish fields. The French narrator says here we see the proud jellyfish hunter. SpongeBob stands completely still at the top of a hill holding his net. The narrator says he stands motionless to lure the jellyfish into a false sense of security. A jellyfish swims right by him, the narrator says, and when his prey ventures too close, he springs into action. SpongeBob puts on his safety glasses. He turns into a spring and bounces after the jellyfish. He stops in midair and looks down. He says, "Huh." He stretches out and starts falling downward, now in normal form. He screams and hits the ground. He says, "Ooh." He separates into 9 smaller SpongeBobs. 8 of them panic in a circle and then join back together. The 9th, SpongeBob then passes by laughing. SpongeBob catches it and places it in an open space on his backside. He wipes the sweat off his forehead saying, "Phew." SpongeBob says he salutes the majestic jellyfish. He salutes a jellyfish that buzzes over his head. He says the jellyfish's command of the sky is unmatched, floating just out of the reach of his net, but near enough that he can see its untamed beauty. A jellyfish floats up and down above SpongeBob's palm. Music begins to play as a microphone lowers in front of him. He clears his throat. SpongeBob sings that if only he could join the jellyfish there in the air, floating free without a care. He wishes he could fly and see things with a different eye. SpongeBob's 2 eyes combine into one big eye. The camera zooms into it and his pupil becomes him flying through the sky. He sings he would fly so very high and touch the sky. He flies through a cloud. He sings and never have to ask why it is that he cannot fly. The blue sky backdrop turns back into jellyfish fields and SpongeBob falls to the ground. He gets up and says, "Wait a minute." He is forgetting the words of Grandpa SquarePants. A thought cloud appears above SpongeBob's head. SpongeBob's grandfather is inside of it. Grandpa SquarePants says if we were meant to fly, we would have propellers on our heads or jet engines on our backs. The cloud disappears. SpongeBob snaps and says he is going to follow his advice by gum. He will invent a flying machine. The scene cuts to him working on building a plane outside of a barn. Patrick walks up to him. Patrick asks what that contraption is. SpongeBob says that is a flying machine. Patrick laughs. SpongeBob asks what is so funny. Patrick says, "Well, it is like his grandpa used to say." A thought cloud appears over his head. Grandpa SquarePants is inside it again. Grandpa SquarePants says if we were meant to fly, then notices Patrick. He says, "Hey, he is not Patrick's grandfather." He pokes Patrick in the head with his cane. The thought cloud disappears. SpongeBob says, "Well, here he goes." He tells Patrick he is off to fly with the jellyfish. He says ignition check and spins the propeller around. He says landing gear check and kicks the tire. He says complimentary peanuts check-a-rooney and holds up a bag of peanuts. He hops into the cockpit now with a hat and glasses on. He says ready for takeoff. He pushes a handle forward. The plane starts up, then comes to pieces. The propeller spins through the air and slices through a grain silo next to the farm. Sand pours out of it and covers him and Patrick. Patrick says SpongeBob cut a hole in Farmer Jenkins' grain silo. SpongeBob says not to remind him. Jenkins runs up saying he knew no good would come from city folk and their flying machines. He tells them to get out. Patrick and SpongeBob run away. Patrick says they better do what he says because he knows how to grow food. The scene cuts to Patrick standing in front of his rock looking dumb. SpongeBob runs up with blueprints in his hand. SpongeBob says, "Well, it took him all night, but here they are." The new blueprints. He was not even close with that last one. Propellers and rudders. He blows raspberries. The scene cuts to him standing on the top of a cliff in a rubbery bat costume. He says this one is going to fly. He stretches out the wings. The camera focuses on SpongeBob's butt, which is sticking out more than ever. He says he can feel it. He asks if Patrick is ready. Patrick at the bottom of the cliff says ready. SpongeBob jumps and starts flapping his wings. He starts gasping, saying it is working. He tells Patrick he is flying. He says he is, then says falling. He hits the ground and says ooh. Patrick runs over and sprays him with a fire extinguisher. The scene cuts to SpongeBob holding a clipboard and Patrick walking. SpongeBob says, "This is it. The physics are all here. This time he is going to fly." He says, "Behold." He walks up to a lawn chair with 2 balloons attached to it and a brick sitting on it. Patrick says, "Oh boy, a birthday party." SpongeBob laughs and says, "No, Patrick. This is the SquarePants Flyer Mark III." He goes over and picks up the brick. He says all you do is remove the brick or ballast. He turns around and realizes that his invention is no longer there. He says, "Huh." He looks up and sees it floating away. He says, "Well, back to the drawing board." Patrick asks if they can have the cake now. He sings happy, happy birthday to you. The scene cuts to SpongeBob attached to a red kite, which is attached to a bicycle that Patrick is on. SpongeBob tells Patrick to get ready to say Eureka. Patrick says okay. SpongeBob says go. Patrick starts pedaling. SpongeBob lifts up off the bucket he is standing on and flies through the air. He says it is working and he is flying. He flies past 3 fish on the side of the road. One fish says, "Hey, look at that guy tied to a kite." Fred asks why he is doing that. Another fish says, "Oh my goodness." Fred asks why he is doing that. The first fish says he will fall and break his... Another fish asks if he can see from up there. An off-screen fish tells him to get down from there. SpongeBob says, "Do not be afraid, Earthbound people. He is not a flying monster, he is just one of them." Suddenly, the kite snaps on him and falls out of the sky. SpongeBob says, "Oh no!" Patrick keeps pedaling as SpongeBob repeatedly hits the ground behind him. SpongeBob says, "Ow," Patrick repeatedly. The 3 fish crack up. The scene cuts to the bargain mart. SpongeBob is standing at the cash register in front of a cashier. He puts the shredded kite on the counter. SpongeBob says, "Excuse me, sir, but he would like to return this kite." The cashier says, "Hey, he knows SpongeBob. Yeah, from today's paper." He holds up a newspaper with a picture of SpongeBob on the front page, and the headline, "Local Nutcase Tries to Fly." SpongeBob reads the headline aloud questioningly. He asks if he is a nutcase because he follows his dreams. He says, well, they laughed at the guy who invented light bulbs too. The cashier says no, they did not. SpongeBob raises his fist and says they will see. He walks outside and past 2 fish. A young fish says, "Look, Mom, it is the Birdman of Bikini Bottom." His mother says wow and wonders why he is still using his legs. The young fish says, "Come on, Birdman," and to flap his wings and fly. He makes flapping motions. He and his mother laugh cruelly. SpongeBob walks away only to encounter many other fish. One fish says, "Hey, Birdman," going to check on his eggs. Another fish suggests maybe he is looking for a statue to poop on. Fred steps in front of SpongeBob and starts flapping his arms and making chicken noises. A crowd of fish around him laughs. SpongeBob tells them to go on and laugh, but it is a sad day in Bikini Bottom when a guy is ridiculed for having dreams. 2 fish holding babies stand to the side of him. One mother asks if SpongeBob thinks he is the only one with unfulfilled dreams. A fish named Sandals says he was supposed to be a concert pianist until he realized he did not have any fingers. He looks at his hands. Another fish says they all had dreams. Another fish asks what makes SpongeBob so special. The crowd of fish turns into an angry mob with pitchforks and torches. The mob yells to get him. The mob chases SpongeBob. He starts panting, then stops saying, "Huh." The camera zooms out to reveal SpongeBob just stepped off the edge of a cliff, and he screams. One fish says, "Good riddance, dreamer." SpongeBob screams as he lands in a mud removal truck. He says, "Ooh." The truck makes a sharp turn, and SpongeBob falls out covered in mud. While falling, he says, "Well, it cannot get any worse." He says, "Oh no." He lands in a feather delivery truck. He sticks his head up, which is now covered with feathers. He says he guesses he spoke too soon. In the television version only, the French narrator says the scene freezes and asks if SpongeBob will learn to fly. He tells viewers to stay tuned. Act 2 begins with SpongeBob having a towel wrapped around his body and the top of his head. He looks out the window at the jellyfish flying by. SpongeBob says, "There they go again, Gary." He sighs and says he supposes he will never join them in the sky. He will be stuck on the ground, sentenced to a flightless life. He takes off his towel under, which is his underwear, and tosses it away. He says, "Oh well," and guesses all dreams are not meant to come true. He grabs his pants and puts them on, saying back to reality. He walks over to the sink. Gary follows and meows. SpongeBob says, "No, Gary, his dreams are silly." He takes the towel off of his head. He grabs a comb and blow dryer and starts brushing and drying his spongy hair. The phone rings. He sticks the blow dryer partially in his pants and answers the phone saying hello. He says, "No, this is not the Birdman of Bikini Bottom." He says, "What?" The blow dryer starts to inflate his pants as well as his shirt. He says, "No, he certainly does not live in a birdcage." He asks who this is. He asks Joe Mama. He says, "Well, listen up, Joe." Gary retreats inside his shell. SpongeBob says he hates to break it to Joe, but flying is impossible. He floats upward and hits the ceiling. He says he has to go now because his head just hit the ceiling. He says, "Huh, then hey." He tells Gary to look. He pulls the blow dryer out of his pants. He says he thinks he is flying. He says, "Jellyfish Fields, here he comes." The top half of his pineapple opens up and he flies out of it. A young fish points and tells his mom to look. It is the flying guy. His mother says wow and guesses he was not a lunatic after all. SpongeBob flies over the town singing he is flying. Citizens start singing too. One fish pops up saying he is flying. Another fish pops out a window saying he is flying. Another fish pops up saying he is really, really flying. Another fish opens her door. Another fish pops out of the sewer, moving his fingers in rhythm. SpongeBob sings. They laughed and scoffed before he had liftoff. Citizens sing, but now he is flying. Various fish appear as they sing. They sing he is flying high in the sky. One fish drives by in a boat. Another fish drives behind them. A couple other fish enter the scene. SpongeBob sings he would love to hang around to say he told them so. He takes off singing, but it is off to Jellyfish Fields he goes. He passes by a sign pointing in the direction of the fields, making it bobble. He sings roads and streets are not for him. He passes over an intersection with a stoplight. Mrs. Puff sings for help and that her snail is up a tree. She has had it since she was a little girl. She takes a deep breath, crying, and sings, but now it looks like the end of its world. The tree branch holding the snail snaps off. Mrs. Puff yells no. SpongeBob catches the snail and says gotcha. He laughs and hands the snail to Mrs. Puff. He tells her next time try the elevator. He flies off. Mrs. Puff thanks the Birdman. SpongeBob flies upward in a circle, leaving a swirling rainbow path behind him. He flies up to a plane in which passengers are sitting. He sings he has never felt so free. One passenger looks out the window at SpongeBob in bewilderment. SpongeBob sings high in the sky is the place for him. He flies away. The passenger pulls down an oxygen mask and starts breathing heavily. SpongeBob sings about helping friends from up above. SpongeBob flies onward some more, still leaving a rainbow path behind him. Sprinkles drop down over a group of children. One child sticks his tongue out and catches one, then makes a face in disgust. SpongeBob sings these are the things that he loves. He picks up a dime off the ceiling of a building and drops it in Mr. Krabs' hand. He sings he will help Mr. Krabs reclaim his dime. Mr. Krabs says he is rich. The scene cuts to Patrick, who stares in awe at a mime doing his routine. SpongeBob swoops down and lifts him into the air. SpongeBob sings he will save Patrick from this mime. Patrick thanks his buddy. SpongeBob flies over to a kelp bush. He sings that even Plankton needs some help when he gets tangled in the kelp. He extends the word kelp for many syllables. Inside the bush, Plankton is struggling to untangle himself from a piece of kelp. SpongeBob lifts him up. Plankton asks SpongeBob to please put him down. The scene cuts to the Bikini Bottom news, where the realistic fish head is reporting. The fish head says all of Bikini Bottom is abuzz over the identity of a mysterious flying man who helps people. The scene cuts to a fish wearing a bad hairpiece. The fish says the flying man found his hairpiece. The scene cuts to another fish. The fish says he helps people and he flies and he helps people. The fish head is back at the desk saying, who knows what superhero act of courage he will astound them with next. The scene cuts to a foggy night at Goo Lagoon. The lighthouse is shining its light around when suddenly it goes out. Two fish run up. One fish says, oh no. The light in the Goo Lagoon lighthouse went out and Sailor Jenkins is headed for the coastline. Jenkins drives through the fog in a boat on the lagoon, saying he is glad he gave up farming. SpongeBob flies down, saying he is coming. He takes out the old light bulb and reaches behind his back to get a new one. He screws it in and flips the switch. It turns on and Sailor Jenkins turns back around. A crowd of people run up cheering. One fish thanks the mysterious flying man. Jenkins slams into a large rock in the middle of the lagoon. He starts to sink, saying he knew no good would come from city folk and their flying machines. SpongeBob walks away with his pants deflated, brushing his hands off. He says that is enough good deeds for one day. He has got a date with a flock of jellyfish. Mr. Krabs runs up, calling SpongeBob's son. He says he needs SpongeBob and his magical pants. SpongeBob says, but Mr. Krabs, he invented these pants so he could fly with the jellyfish. If he keeps doing favors for people, he will never make his dreams a reality. He starts to walk away. Mr. Krabs says, but it is an emergency. SpongeBob stops and inflates his pants. He says they should roll. He flies through the sky with Mr. Krabs in his arms, asking where to. Mr. Krabs says his garage. SpongeBob says he has got it. He lands next to Mr. Krabs' garage and asks what the emergency is. Mr. Krabs asks if SpongeBob is sure he is up for it. SpongeBob says he thinks his pants can handle it. Mr. Krabs says he needs SpongeBob to. SpongeBob says yes anxiously. Mr. Krabs says to clean. SpongeBob asks if he means clean up crime. Mr. Krabs says his garage. SpongeBob's pants deflate. He asks if that is the emergency. Mr. Krabs says, but everyone knows it is easier to clean a garage when you can fly. SpongeBob crosses his arms and says, all right, he will clean the garage. But after this, no more favors. He inflates his pants again. Later, he flies out of the garage, finished with the job. He says, all done. Mr. Krabs is sunbathing and asks about the recyclables. SpongeBob says, aw, shrimp. He turns around and re-enters the garage. Even later, he flies away saying, finally, Jellyfish Fields, here he comes. Patrick off-screen calls SpongeBob's name. SpongeBob says, Patrick is in trouble. Patrick is lying on his back in the street calling SpongeBob's name. SpongeBob flies down to him asking what it is, buddy. Patrick asks if SpongeBob will scratch his tummy. SpongeBob gets annoyed, but does it anyway. Patrick says, ah. A montage begins. Larry asks SpongeBob to help him pick out a tie. He holds out 3 different colored ties. SpongeBob picks one. Squidward asks SpongeBob to clean his bathtub. SpongeBob unwillingly obeys. Mrs. Puff asks him to balance her checkbook. SpongeBob scribbles in her checkbook. Plankton asks him to help spread the word of evil. SpongeBob hands out newspapers with the headline Evil on them. A fish named Ted asks SpongeBob to untangle his phone cords. Another fish asks him to do his geometry. Another fish asks him to talk to her plants. Another fish asks him to rub his scalp. SpongeBob rubs the fish's scalp. The fish says, oh yeah. SpongeBob stops and starts flailing his arms. He says, wait a minute, repeatedly. He is supposed to be at Jellyfish Fields right now, but instead, he is rubbing this person's scalp, and he does not even know who this person is. The fish says, but they went to elementary school together. SpongeBob asks if it is Dennis. He starts rubbing his scalp again. The fish says, oh yeah. The scene cuts to a crowd of fish searching for SpongeBob. Various fish call out SpongeBob's name. SpongeBob is hiding behind a rock. He says if he does not give these feverish favor seekers the slip, he will never get to fly with the jellyfish. He quietly flies away. A young fish says, hey, there he is. SpongeBob flies faster. The young fish says he is getting away. Fred says no and that SpongeBob owes them favors. The young fish tells them to get him. The angry crowd chases after him into downtown Bikini Bottom. While SpongeBob flies past the buildings in a straight line, the crowd runs up and down each building. They stop at a cliff before Jellyfish Fields. SpongeBob keeps flying. SpongeBob says he is almost at Jellyfish Fields. He is going to make it. One fish says he is headed for Jellyfish Fields. They will never catch him now. Jenkins says off-screen that he will take care of this. The crowd says it is Cannonball Jenkins. Jenkins is inside a lit cannon wearing a red helmet and suit. He launches out of the cannon and towards SpongeBob. He collides with him and SpongeBob's inflatable pants explode. The two hurtle toward the ground. SpongeBob falls even further as Cannonball Jenkins opens up a red parachute. Jenkins says he told everyone nothing good would come from city folk and their flying machines. The crowd watches as SpongeBob crashes to the ground. They walk over. Fred asks what have they done. He starts to cry, saying, come on, everybody. He thinks a proper burial is in order. He picks up the pants, saying a pair of pants like these come around once in a lifetime. The crowd leaves. SpongeBob, now in his underwear, regains consciousness. SpongeBob says, well, it was fun while it lasted. He walks up to Jellyfish Fields, then walks away. He says he guesses he is not meant to fly after all. He sighs and starts to raise up in the air. He says, then hey. A group of jellyfish are below him, carrying him up. He says his jellyfish friends are helping him fly. Without pants, he guesses it just goes to show something. The jellyfish carry him back to Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob sings, you do not need a plane to fly. One fish looks out the window at him. He sings, plastic wings may make you cry. A flock of scallops fly by. He sings, kites are made for windy days. Lawn chair with balloons fly away. The crowd of fish bury SpongeBob's pants as they mourn over them. He sings, inflatable pants you may as well skip. He arrives at his home. The jellyfish put him back on the ground. He sings, if you want to fly, all you need is friendship. The jellyfish buzz away. He waves, saying goodbye, jellies. They taught him a valuable lesson, although he is not quite sure what it was. Patrick walks up and says, hey. He suggests they fly down to the pizza house for a slice. SpongeBob says, no more flying for him. He will leave that to the jellyfish. He opens his door. Patrick says, suit yourself. He lifts up his arm and flies. SpongeBob turns back around asking, did Patrick just... He laughs and says, nah. He enters his house again but opens the door one last time just to make sure. The scene cuts back to Patchy, who says, wow. He asks the kids if that was not great. Potty suggests they watch it again. Patchy chuckles and says that is a great idea. He looks on the table asking where the remote is. He continues searching. He stands up saying, oh, he lost the remote. He says they should make those things. A brick flies through the window and hits Patchy on the head. He says A and falls to the floor. Potty squawks. Patchy stands back up and drops the brick on his foot. He is now holding his remote. He says his remote. He goes to the window thanking the stranger. Mrs. Johnson is outside in a wheelchair saying not to mention it, Patchy. She rides away in her jet-powered wheelchair, leaving skid marks behind. Patchy sighs and asks which one of these cockamamie buttons is rewind. He presses a button. A juggling clown from a circus appears on TV. He says, no, that is not it. He presses another button. A weatherman appears on TV. He says no and wrong again. He keeps flipping through the channels and grunting. A black and white Wild West movie comes on, then a football game, then a sea anemone, then a blob movie, then a giraffe, then a Tyrannosaurus Rex battling a Triceratops. Potty flies over and squawks to let him do it. Patchy says no, and to get away. The lights go out. Patchy says that is the light switch. The lights turn back on. He tells Potty to give him that. Patchy and Potty fight over the remote until a mariachi band appears from behind the couch. Potty squawks that is the mariachi band button. Patchy growls, saying he hates technology. While the band continues playing, Patchy continues pressing buttons on the remote. He says rewind, darn you. Suddenly, the VCR starts unraveling the VHS tape reel in a squeaking sound. Potty squawks, "Failure ahoy." Patchy yells no and tries to stop the VHS tape reel from spewing out. He says stop repeatedly and to go back, infernal machine. He gets tangled up and falls over, still struggling. He says oh no, he ruined the lost episode. Now it is lost forever. Potty squawks, lost forever. The French narrator says oh boy, what a loser. He guesses the lost episode will remain lost. But tape or no tape, as long as there are stars in the sky, SpongeBob will live on in their hearts and in their minds. A SpongeBob constellation appears over Patchy's house and the mariachi band's music ends. The narrator says, now get lost. He says he means bye. No, really, get lost. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have You Seen This Snail, also known as Where's Gary? Have You Seen This Snail is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants Season 4 that aired on the 11th of November 2005. The episode drew 7.93 million viewers during its original broadcast. The special is also known as Where's Gary? The episode tells the story of Gary running away from home after SpongeBob accidentally neglects him while obsessed with a paddleball challenge. This special is known for featuring one of the most emotional storylines in the series with the song Gary Come Home. The episode opens with SpongeBob walking on screen while struggling to carry a big sack of snail food. Patrick greets him and asks what he is doing. SpongeBob explains he is carrying this heavy bag of snail food for Gary. Patrick asks how Gary is. SpongeBob says he is fine, but asks if they can talk about this some other time because this snail food is really heavy. Patrick says, oh sure, but there was something he wanted to tell SpongeBob. Something important. Patrick says he remembers, then notices that SpongeBob is gone. Patrick wonders who he was talking to. SpongeBob puts the bag of snail food down and notices a piece of paper on the door. He says, ahoy captain, what have we here? It is a tiny form letter. He goes inside and reads it aloud. The letter says, dear sir, or madam, we are sorry we missed you. We will attempt to redeliver your package at our earliest convenience. The doorbell rings. SpongeBob says hello and gasps. He says his package and yells whoopee. He takes it inside while leaving the bag of snail food outside. He says, oh, let's see what we got here. He cuts it open. Inside is his official Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball set. He says woo and yeah. He tries to use the paddleball but ends up missing, causing the ball to hit him in the face and knocking him backwards onto the box. He grunts. He grabs one of the sheets of paper that flew out of the box. He reads what's this. The paper says, take the Dirty Bubble Challenge. Hit the paddleball 29,998,559,671,349 times in a row. SpongeBob says dirty bubble wherever you float. He hereby accepts the challenge. He takes the ball and hits it on the paddle, but it comes back and hits him in the eye. He says darn it. He tries again with the same results. He says darn it, this happens again. He says darn it repeatedly. Gary goes into the kitchen and sees that his food bowl is empty. He checks the time and it is snack time. Gary meows. SpongeBob is hit by the paddle ball in the eye again and says, darn it. Gary meows again. SpongeBob stops and looks around asking what that was. He pauses and is about to hit the ball again. Gary meows louder. SpongeBob startled looks at Gary and blinks twice. He says, oh, Gary, that distracting sound came from him. He is sorry he cannot play with Gary right now. Mermaid Man needs him. When he tries the paddle ball again, Gary interrupts by meowing. The ball hits SpongeBob. He says annoyed that Gary please. He is trying to defeat the dirty bubble. When he lifts his paddle ball up, Gary is attached to it. Gary meows. SpongeBob glares at Gary angrily. He says, so let's get this straight, Gary. Gary does not want him to defeat the dirty bubble. He says dirty bubble, terror of the seven seas, arch nemesis of his favorite TV superheroes Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and apparently a renowned paddleball champion. The dirty bubble on the box laughs. SpongeBob says, well, he for one recognizes the importance of this undertaking, but whether or not Gary does remains to be seen. Now, if Gary does not mind, he would like to get back to it. Gary slithers off. SpongeBob says, pets, sometimes he wonders if they understand a word you are saying. Gary jumps on SpongeBob's face, making him run around and scream. He takes Gary off and snaps at him furiously. SpongeBob says Gary, he hates it when Gary does that. Now get. He throws Gary away and picks up the paddle ball. He smiles and says to leave your master to his important affairs. Gary rolls into his bowl and sees a crumb of food left. A bunch of spiders crawl out of it. Gary takes one last look at SpongeBob. SpongeBob says, darn it. Gary packs his things and starts to leave. SpongeBob says, hey. Gary slithers over. SpongeBob says he got one. He tells the dirty bubble to say its prayers. Gary meows sadly. Gary slithers off away, down a river while riding on a raft, and takes a bus out of town. The scene cuts to the next day. Patrick exits his rock with a cup of coffee. He drinks his coffee, then eats the cup and walks towards SpongeBob's house. Patrick says he has not seen SpongeBob in a couple days. He is sure SpongeBob will be glad to know he remembered what he wanted to tell him. He knocks on the door, then notices the bag of snail food on the ground, much to his surprise. He says that's strange. Usually he knocks on the door with this hand. He walks in asking if SpongeBob is around. SpongeBob's voice is muffled, saying darn it. Patrick asks if that is SpongeBob. SpongeBob keeps saying darn it in a muffled voice. Patrick says SpongeBob questioningly. He opens the door to find SpongeBob lying on the ground. SpongeBob says darn it repeatedly. Patrick asks what happened. He runs over to a picture of a Krabby Patty on the wall, saying this picture is crooked. He adjusts the picture and yells SpongeBob's name. SpongeBob looks at the paddle with bloodshot eyes and says, darn it. Patrick tells him to snap out of it. SpongeBob says Patrick then trails off. Patrick asks what it is, buddy, and says SpongeBob can tell him. SpongeBob says he took the Dirty Bubble Challenge. Patrick asks he what, and starts crying. SpongeBob asks why Patrick is crying. Patrick says because many years ago he took that challenge. SpongeBob asks really. Patrick says uh-huh. SpongeBob asks what happened. Patrick says he won, but then he lost the trophy they sent him. SpongeBob says he lost then says that's terrible. He comforts his despondent friend. SpongeBob says, come on, Pat. They should have some kelp cookies and seahorse milk, because that always cheers him up when he has lost something. The scene cuts to SpongeBob's kitchen, where SpongeBob pours Patrick some seahorse milk in a glass. He gives Patrick the glass, saying, there you are, Pat, fresh seahorse milk. Patrick thanks his buddy. SpongeBob says, hey, Pat, does he ever feel like he is forgetting something important? He trips over Gary's bowl. He says, he thinks it has something to do with this bowl. Gary's food bowl. That's it. He has got to feed Gary. He gets the bag of snail food, which has dust on it from outside. He says that's a lot of dust for a couple hours. He brings it in and pours it in Gary's bowl. He calls Gary, saying dinner. Gary does not answer. SpongeBob takes out a triangle, saying, come on, Gary, soup's on. He rings it, calling Gary's name. Gary still does not respond. SpongeBob says, hey, Pat. Patrick says, yeah. SpongeBob twitches his eye twice, looking obviously worried and stressed. He asks how long was he taking the Dirty Bubble Challenge. Patrick says about a week. SpongeBob, shocked, asks a week, and if Patrick is sure. Patrick says, well, and pours the glass of seahorse milk. The seahorse milk is revealed to be solid, which falls like jelly. Patrick sniffs the jelly. He starts eating the solid seahorse milk, analyzing the taste closely. He swallows it and shudders in disgust after tasting the overly sour taste. Patrick says, yeah, it is about a week, maybe 10 days. SpongeBob, horrified, says 10 days. He calls Gary's name. He searches all over the house for Gary, but he cannot find him. He says Gary's name repeatedly throughout the house. In the kitchen, Patrick is sleeping until SpongeBob pops out, startling Patrick. Patrick says, SpongeBob's eyes fill up with tears as his lip quivers. He says he cannot find Gary. The scene shows Gary slithering across the sand. Echoing howls are heard. Gary looks at his stomach and it is howling at him. Gary sneezes and meows. SpongeBob says this never fails. Gary's favorite treats. Gary cannot resist these babies. They are filled with 8 types of organic sediment that bottom feeders like Gary cannot get enough of. Patrick asks 8. SpongeBob says, yeah, something like that. All you really have to do is shake the can. Gary comes running every time. He tells Patrick to go on and try it. Patrick shakes it, but it makes no noise. SpongeBob says let him see that. SpongeBob tries it, but it still makes no noise. He says, he does not understand. This is a brand new. Patrick burps. SpongeBob shakes Patrick's belly, and Patrick laughs. Patrick says he only tasted 6 types of sediment. The scene cuts to nighttime where SpongeBob and Patrick are searching for Gary. Patrick is shaking his belly. SpongeBob calls Gary's name and asks if he is under here. He lifts a flower up. He tells Patrick to keep shaking. Patrick says oh and jiggles his belly. SpongeBob calls Gary's name. Squidward asks what those Neanderthals are up to. He says they do not know he is busy spoiling himself. SpongeBob and Patrick open Squidward's door while he is in the bathtub. Squidward screams 3 times and pants. SpongeBob tells Patrick to check over there. He will check in here. He checks in the bathtub. Squidward is in, asking if Patrick found him yet. Patrick pulls the sink out from the wall, making water shoot out everywhere. He says no, but he will keep looking. SpongeBob says teary-eyed that there is nowhere left to look. Patrick says there is one place they have not checked. The scene cuts to SpongeBob and Patrick standing in front of SpongeBob's mailbox full of letters. SpongeBob says he doubts Gary could fit in there. Patrick says it cannot hurt to look. SpongeBob says here goes nothing. He opens the mailbox and a bunch of letters shoot out. A rolled up paper falls on the ground. SpongeBob tells Patrick to look. Patrick asks what it is. SpongeBob says, let's see. He opens it and reads. The letter says, "Dear SpongeBob, these last few years have been some of the best of my life, but he must move on. He should not bother to come looking for him." SpongeBob starts to cry while reading. The letter continues, saying, "By now Gary has probably found a new owner who actually remembers to fill up his food bowl every now and again. Sincerely, Gary, at least until his new owner renames him." SpongeBob and Patrick are horrified. SpongeBob says, "Dear Neptune, what has he done?" Patrick says, scornfully disappointed, asking, "What does SpongeBob mean? He drove Gary away." SpongeBob shudders. Patrick says it is right there in black and white. "See, right there and there." SpongeBob sadly says Gary's name. The scene cuts to Gary slithering into another town. A couple walks by him laughing. Gary sees two people named Fred and Debbie Recked eating inside a diner. Fred asks if his pants are too high, dear. He takes a bite out of his burger, then notices Gary outside. He closes the blinds on the window as they both laugh. Gary slithers along more until he stops and sees some nachos in an alleyway. When he is about to take a bite of it, 3 snails frighten him by hissing. One snail says, "Look who came to dinner." Gary runs away fearfully. Another snail says, "Guess he did not like nachos." All snails sigh. Gary slithers away until he runs into a dark figure. An elderly woman called Grandma says, "There you are." She grabs Gary, saying, "There you are, Miss Tuftsy. Oh, Grandma finally found you." She was starting to get worried. "Now let's get you home, Miss Tuftsy, and get you something to eat." She shakes Gary, saying, He feels much lighter than Grandma remembers. The scene cuts to Grandma's house, where she is feeding Gary heart-shaped cookies and putting an electric blanket over him. She says, "There you go, Miss Tuftsy." Grandma knows Gary likes his mister. He'd set to extra cozy when he is home relaxing. Gary says, Grandma says, "Goodness, Gary is almost out of cookies. Here she will go and get some more." Now Gary should not go running off again. She says, Gary looks at a spoon collection and looks at a picture of snails. Grandma says, "There we go," and puts some more cookies on. After this, she will make up some of those deviled eggs she promised. She drops an empty cookie sheet. She says, "Oh, how about a little music?" Grandma's got a killer stereo system. Music warbles faster as Grandma cranks the record player and tweaky jazz plays. Gary continues to eat cookies as jazz music begins to play. Grandma says, "Oh, this song reminds her of her days as a riveter." She dances, saying Gary makes Grandma feel so young. She tells Miss Tuftsy to come on and they should do the boogie woogie. While doing the dance, she breaks her back and says, "Oh." She sets Gary back on the chair. She says, "Okay, that is enough of the boogie woogie for now." SpongeBob calls Gary's name repeatedly. He looks into a hat store. On the reflection of the window, a truck with a picture of a snail drives by and stops. SpongeBob turns around excitedly, saying, "Gary." The truck's logo reads, "Hungry Snails Love Snail Po." SpongeBob frowns. Tires squeal as the dust gets into SpongeBob's face and makes him cough. SpongeBob calls Gary's name while crying in despair. The scene fades out to Grandma and Gary sitting on the couch watching TV, eating a bowl of popcorn. Grandma says she knows how much Gary loves these late-night crime drama programs. She asks if Miss Tuftsy does not. She says, "Oh heavens, look at the time." The clock reads 7:30. She says it is time for bed, Miss Tuftsy. When Gary jumps off the couch, a picture of SpongeBob comes out of his bag. Gary sadly meows. The picture of SpongeBob says furiously, "Quiet, Gary. Cannot he see he is busy?" Gary gives a raspberry. Gary goes into a bright and decorated room with Grandma. Grandma says, "Here is Gary's room, Miss Tuftsy." Gary meows questioningly. Grandma says, "Here you are, darling. Let Grandma tuck you in." "There you go." She says, "Oh." Gary's sad, precious round eyes sparkle up at Grandma. She says she almost forgot his goodnight kiss. She kisses Gary, saying, "Sweet dreams, Miss Tuftsy." She walks out of the room and claps twice to make the lights go out. The scene cuts to next day at the Krusty Krab, where SpongeBob is walking into the restaurant on his knees. He has bloodshot eyes. Mr. Krabs says SpongeBob is 15 minutes late. SpongeBob says, "Sorry, Mr. Krabs. He was out all night looking for Gary. He sees Gary ran away, and well, now he." Mr. Krabs interrupts, asking if SpongeBob is okay. He looks kind of different. SpongeBob says, "Well, he is not exactly what you would call okay, Mr. Krabs." He sees his. Mr. Krabs snaps his fingers and says, "Aha, SpongeBob just forgot to put his hat on." He puts SpongeBob's Krusty Crew employee hat on SpongeBob's head. Mr. Krabs says he knew he would figure it out. SpongeBob's tears drop on the patty. He says Gary's name. A customer says, "Yeah, he would like a refund for this Krabby Patty." Mr. Krabs asks, "Refund, and what's wrong with it?" The customer says, "Oh, nothing really, except that it is covered in tears." He reveals that there are 6 tears on the patty. Mr. Krabs says, "What the?" SpongeBob says Gary while crying. Mr. Krabs says, "SpongeBob, there are customers out there, boy, waiting to be fed." SpongeBob says this would not be the first time he disappointed someone who was hungry. Mr. Krabs says, "Okay, boy, why does SpongeBob not tell Mr. Krabs, what is wrong? SpongeBob says, well, you see, Mr. Krabs grabs SpongeBob's mouth, saying, that's enough, boy. See, it is not always what you say that matters. Sometimes it is what you do not say. He asks if SpongeBob understands. SpongeBob says, yes, Mr. Krabs. He should have told Gary how important he was to him. Mr. Krabs says he does not know what that has to do with making Krabby Patties, but he does know this. Any problem you have can be solved with a little hard work. SpongeBob says Mr. Krabs is right. Mr. Krabs says, that's me, boy. SpongeBob says if he is going to find Gary, he is going to need to work harder at it. Mr. Krabs says what? The scene cuts to Patrick sleeping on the ground. A bunch of things fall on Patrick and wake him up. Patrick says it is the apocalypse. Office products falling from the sky. SpongeBob says no, Patrick. They are going to use this stuff to go find Gary. Patrick says, but he thought SpongeBob drove Gary away with his neglect and indifference. SpongeBob sighs and says, Patrick, now is not the time for talking. They have got work to do. The scene cuts to Grandma's house. Grandma is squeezing orange juice from the orange. She says, there you go, Miss Tuftsy. Fresh squeezed. It takes a little longer to make it that way, but it was a labor of love. Gary meows. Grandma asks, how about a little more syrup on those pancakes? She pours syrup on the pancakes. Then she takes the spoon and scoops up a bite for Gary. She says, here comes the train, and makes train sounds. The scene cuts to Grandma and Gary in the car. Grandma says, set phasers on fun, Miss Tuftsy. The engine revs and tires squeal as Grandma drives fast over to Martha's craft zone. She says, oh, here we are. Both walk inside. As soon as the door closes, SpongeBob and Patrick arrive at the front door with posters and tape. SpongeBob says, here is a good spot. He puts a poster on the door. The poster says, Gary, I am sorry. Please come home. Love, SpongeBob. He says, quick, hand him the tape. Patrick says, hey, they are having a sale on scented pine cones. SpongeBob says, Patrick, this is no time for that. Patrick goes in. SpongeBob sighs. Patrick says pine cones repeatedly. Grandma says these pipe cleaners are simply delightful. Patrick says, old lady, quick. He is looking for the scented pine cones. It is an emergency. Grandma says, well, she hopes he was not looking to buy them, Sonny, because Grandma already picked up all they had. Patrick says, once again, you and he are kept apart, oh sweet scented pine cones. He says, hey, Gary. He walks out as Gary stares at him. SpongeBob finishes putting up the posters and says, there. When Patrick comes out, the posters on the door are torn in half. Patrick says, SpongeBob says, come on, Pat, just take these flyers and hand them out. They walk off. Grandma walks out saying, come on, Miss Tuftsy, there is plenty more fun to be had. A song called Gary Come Home by Stu starts to play while SpongeBob and Patrick put flyers up. The song begins with lyrics saying, Gary, now I know I was wrong. I messed up and now you are gone. Gary, I am sorry I neglected you. Oh, I never expected you to run away and leave me feeling this empty. Your meow right now would sound like music to me. Please come home because I miss you, Gary. Gary, come home. Gary, cannot you see I was blind? I will do anything to change your mind. More than a pet, you are my best friend. Too cool to forget come back, because we are family. And forgive me for making you want to roam. And now my heart is beating like the saddest metronome. Somewhere I hope you are reading my latest 3-word poem. Gary, come home. During the song, SpongeBob is shown on TVs calling Gary's name. Patrick says he wants peanuts. He presses a red button in the airplane. SpongeBob says, Pat, no. The airplane loses control. Both scream as the airplane rides through the message in the sky. Gary, come home, and changes it to Lisa. Will you marry me? A woman points to the message in the sky. A man asks, who is this Lisa person? Another man asks what? The woman slaps him angrily. The scene cuts to Grandma walking into her house. Grandma says she will get a lovely meatloaf in the oven for Gary. Gary meows. Grandma says, do not worry, it is no trouble at all. Easy to do. Gary smells his newspaper pile. Gary meows. Grandma asks, oh, Miss Tuftsy, does he have to go potty? Here, why does he not use this stack of flyers given to her today by a little chubby boy? Gary reads all the flyers that SpongeBob and Patrick made. Gary imagines SpongeBob in a thought bubble. SpongeBob says, Gary, please come back to me. Go, boy, go. Grandma whistles. Grandma says Gary should stay right there. The meatloaf is almost done. Gary groans, then slithers over and opens a closet door. Inside, he finds a bunch of empty snail shells. Gary becomes horrified. He realizes that these are all the deceased snails that were overfed by Grandma. Gary will be next. Grandma says, oh dear. The meatloaf is not quite ready yet, but Grandma knows how hungry Gary is. Miss Tuftsy, so she whipped up a quick batch of cookies. The belt on Gary's belly snaps. A bunch of fat breaks through his shell. The snails in the painting on the wall talk. The snails say run. Gary strains to get out of the shell pile, but does and rolls across the floor, up Grandma's cookie plate into the air, and out the pet door. She throws cookies at him, but he only gives them a dreary-eyed look, and they get stuck in the door like axes. Grandma says Gary does not want cookies. He should not fret, because she made a batch of deviled eggs too. Gary looks behind him, and Grandma is slowly walking after him while throwing more cookies at him. She says, "Come back, Miss Tuftsy." He does not want these to go to waste, does he? They were a labor of love. Gary hides behind some trash cans in the alleyway. Grandma says, "Oh, do not worry, Miss Tuftsy. Grandma will find him." One of the alley snails says, "Hey, you are that guy that does not like nachos." Grandma says, "Miss Tuftsy," she knows he is back there. She can hear his stomach growling. Gary pushes the snail out into the sidewalk. The snail says, "Hey." Grandma says, "Oh, there you are, Miss Tuftsy." The snail asks who. Grandma says Gary must be starving. Gary sighs deeply. The scene cuts to SpongeBob trying to cry on his couch. Patrick says, "Just let it out, buddy." That's right. SpongeBob says, despondent that he cannot cry anymore, Patrick. When Gary left, he took all his tears with him. Patrick asks, "Did SpongeBob just say Gary?" He says SpongeBob excitedly. He just remembered. Earlier today at the craft store, he saw these huge chunks of balsa wood. SpongeBob's eyes fill up with tears. Patrick says they were awesome. SpongeBob says Gary loved balsa wood. He runs off crying, saying he has got to try to forget Gary. He walks past a wall with a bunch of lost flyers of Gary. He says for some reason he cannot get Gary out of his mind. He looks at a giant billboard of Gary, which says, "Have you seen me?" on it. SpongeBob says he blew it. He really blew it. He took Gary for granted. He is sorry. He tells the billboard not to just stare at him, but to say something. He says he is talking to a billboard. Gary comes into frame behind SpongeBob and meows. SpongeBob says now he is hearing things. If only he could see Gary one more time so he could tell him how much he loves him. If only he could hear Gary meow one last time. Gary climbs onto SpongeBob's head and meows. SpongeBob says, "Yeah, like that." Gary purrs. SpongeBob says, "Gary, your purring is making it hard to forget you." He notices Gary and picks him up and hugs him cheerfully. He says, "Gary, oh Gary." He kisses Gary. He asks, "So did Gary hear any of that, or does he have to repeat himself?" Gary meows. SpongeBob says, "Okay, good." He promises Gary things are going to be different between them. Gary will see Pal. Now they should go home and get Gary something to eat. He must be starving. Gary groans and meows. The episode ends and SpongeBob sings "Where's Gary" during the closing credits. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Dunces and Dragons. Dunces and Dragons is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants Season 4 that aired on the 20th of February 2006. The episode drew 8.56 million viewers during its original broadcast. The special features SpongeBob and Patrick traveling back in time to medieval Bikini Bottom, where they meet ancestors of the main characters and become involved in a quest to rescue Princess Pearl from an evil wizard. The episode opens with SpongeBob and Patrick running through fields. SpongeBob laughs and tells Patrick to hurry because it is almost time for the joust. Patrick says he is right behind SpongeBob and giggles. Both stop. A castle with a sign that says Medieval Moments is seen in front of them. A man blows a trumpet. A speaker welcomes them to Medieval Moments. He says they are just 20 wizards' paces away from swords, sorcery, and bad hygiene. SpongeBob and Patrick run in. An advisor tells them to come right this way, please. SpongeBob says, "Excuse me, my good man." He believes the advisor meant to say "righteth this wayeth." Both giggle. A henchman is tempted to hurt himself, but does not. He says someday, but not today. Inside the castle, Patrick is shown eating mutton. SpongeBob asks how that mutton is. Patrick says he thinks it is mutton-tastic. He bites the mutton and a trumpet sounds. The medieval queen tells someone named Maury that he is supposed to announce the jousting tournament. The medieval king activates his microphone. He says, "Good evening, fair patrons of medieval moments." Everyone cheers. By royal decree, they ask that 2 audience members come forth and participate in the royal joust. SpongeBob and Patrick raise their hands, saying "over here" repeatedly. They say "pick us" and "hey." The medieval king says, "Oh, all right." It appears that the pink starfish and the yellow sponge are their lucky contestants tonight. He says "hooray" without enthusiasm. SpongeBob says to Patrick that this is exciting. To think they will be watching the joust this close up. A royal henchman says they will not be watching the joust. They are in the joust. SpongeBob asks Pat if he knows how to ride a seahorse. Patrick says nuh-uh. Seahorses gallop on opposite sides of the stadium. SpongeBob asks the seahorse sir if he is gentle on beginners. The seahorse rides towards Patrick, who screams. Patrick yells for SpongeBob to help. The crowd yells to take his head off. SpongeBob says he does not suppose now would be a good time to ask for a bathroom break. Both are screaming as SpongeBob hits Patrick clear out of the stadium. SpongeBob calls Patrick's name. SpongeBob's seahorse throws him out of the stadium and he time travels back to the past. Patrick lands outside and says he is glad that is over. SpongeBob screams and lands on top of him. Patrick groans. Cavalry is shown riding towards SpongeBob and Patrick. SpongeBob says, look, some employees from the restaurant came to help them. A horseman says to arrest these traitors for committing the act of witchcraft by falling from the sky. SpongeBob touches the spear's point and says, whoa, they really go that extra mile for authenticity. He says, salutations, fellow knights. The horseman says, silence, heathen. He slices SpongeBob's helmet in half. SpongeBob says, ah, and that he gets the point. Both are tossed in the dungeon. The dungeon master says, nighty-night, ladies. They will have many more in here. He laughs evilly. SpongeBob says, gee, Pat, these props sure are convincing. Both hear clarinet playing. A Squidward-like creature wearing a medieval outfit is playing the clarinet. His name is Squidly, who is Squidward's ancestor. Squidly says, oh blast, this confounded instrument. If he never learns to play with ease, may his own great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson be cursed tenfold. SpongeBob asks Squidward what he is doing here. Squidly looks around confused and asks if someone is talking to him. SpongeBob laughs and says, good one, Squidward. He imitates Squidly, saying, does thou talketh to me. SpongeBob laughs. Squidly says, scoff not, young squire. SpongeBob has mistaken him for another. He is Squidly the king's royal fool, or at least he was until he royally messed up. SpongeBob asks, wow, what did he do? Squidly says he will show them. He sings that he was the king's favorite fool. He made merry mirth and laughter. Then he told one bad joke, and the king had a stroke. Now he hangs from ye old rafter. Patrick's stomach rumbles. He asks, what does a guy have to do to get some mutton around here? He is starving. Squidly tells him not to hold his breath. They will be lucky if they get fed again by the 12th century. SpongeBob says they sure take their role-playing seriously around here. An explosion happens outside. Patrick asks what that is. Squidly sings that the evil wizard's dragon is here. See the townsfolk scream with fear. See the townsfolk try to run. He can tell this will not be fun. The dragon will torch everything in the valley. Hospitals, schools, retirement homes, and even ye olde bowling alley. A citizen says not the bowling alley. The dragon zaps the bowling alley into dust. The citizen is bawling. SpongeBob says knights, jesters, dragons, medieval bowling alleys, 12th century. He asks Patrick if he sees. They really are in medieval times. Patrick says, oh no. He thinks he left the water running at home. The dungeon master says the king wants a word with them. Patrick says, yay. SpongeBob says, wait. They do not leave without Squidly. The dungeon master asks, why should he take him? SpongeBob says because, Squidly has thought of some brilliant songs for the king and he just has to hear them. He asks if that is right, Squidly. Squidly nods, saying absolutely. He plays clarinet. SpongeBob stops Squidly and says maybe he should wait for the king to hear that. Squidly says suit yourself. SpongeBob does not know what he is missing. King Krabs is bawling, saying oh woe is me repeatedly. He asks what to do. A character named Pearl calls him father and asks what he is going on about now. King Krab says, oh, just the same old thing, dear daughter. It is that wretched wizard Planktonomor. His insidious dragons destroyed half his kingdom. Soon there will be no citizens to tax. Not one of his best knights has been able to defeat him. He has a stroke. Pearl says, father, remember your blood pressure. He would not want another leech treatment, would he? A leech meows. A henchman says, your highness, the dungeon master has brought the prisoners he asked for. King Krab says, well, do not just stand there. Send them in. The henchman says, sure thing, your highnesses. King Krabs and Pearl look at each other blankly. SpongeBob says, hey, Mr. Krabs. King Krabs asks how dare he bark at him in that tone, knave. He is the feared ruler of this kingdom and will be addressed as such. SpongeBob says sorry. King Krabs asks, why have they brought this fool back into his throne room? Squidly says, if your majesty may be so kind, he thinks he has a song that will answer all his questions. King Krabs says, oh, all right, but this is his last chance, fool. Squidly says, oh, thank you, sire, thank you. He will not be disappointed. Squidly sings, oh, hear me, king, for he must sing how the king is the greatest at everything, like letting a dragon burn down their city, a horrible sight that was not pretty. It was all his fault, and it is a pity. He is bad. He is to blame. Now hang his kingly head in shame. Squidly shakes his butt, and SpongeBob and Patrick giggle. He sings la 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 repeatedly. Squidly, SpongeBob, and Patrick all sing together that the king is bad, the king's to blame, he hangs his kingly head in shame. They sing la la la. King Krabs tells guards to send these slanderers to the guillotine. A guillotine is shown that cuts a pineapple in half. SpongeBob says, wait, they do not understand. They are not from here. King Krabs says that is because they are witches who were sent by Planktonomor to destroy him. SpongeBob says no, they are time travelers. King Krabs gets angry. SpongeBob tells Patrick to help him out here. Patrick says he is not sure there is anything he can add at this point. King Krabs says okay, he is through playing around. He tells guards and gives the signal for their beheading. SpongeBob says no wait. Squidly says no please. Pearl says father you must spare them. Has he forgotten of the prophecy? King Krabs asks what prophecy. Pearl says the one right above his head. King Krabs asks how long that has been there. Pearl says the story tells of two brave knights who fall from the sky and are sent by the king to rid the lamenting town of the evil dragon, controlled by the one-eyed wizard. She says, "Father, do you not get it? It is them. These strangers have come to rescue them like in the prophecy." A dragon breaks through the wall. King Krabs asks how dare the dragon defile his house demon. The dragon zaps King Krabs and grabs Princess Pearl. King Krabs says Princess Pearl, and that he is coming. He tells the dragon to prepare to meet its maker, Foul Beast. The dragon flicks King Krabs away. SpongeBob is at the guillotine saying, well, he guesses this is it, Patrick. Patrick says he guesses so. He is going to miss SpongeBob. Patrick cries. SpongeBob says he will miss Patrick too, buddy. Both are sobbing as King Krabs flies up to SpongeBob screaming and crashes into the guillotine, breaking it and saving him. The dragon takes Pearl away. Pearl says, "Oh, Daddy, help." King Krabs calls her name and cries. He asks, can no one stop this madness? The sun shines on SpongeBob and Patrick. King Krabs says, you too. He kisses their feet. He says his apologies, most noble and valued warriors. Patrick says he guesses this is what you call the royal treatment. King Krabs says, may Neptune grant them safety on their perilous journey to the evil wizard's castle from which no one has escaped alive. SpongeBob asks if they are going on a perilous journey. King Krabs says, but of course, they are the chosen ones. He asks, what's this? A lost piece of the prophecy. He says, SpongeBob says, let him guess. More praise for their heroic stature. King Krabs says, actually it says he was supposed to kick them out of here. SpongeBob says, say no more, your majesty. Us manly knights are so manly they kick themselves out of places. He says, come on, Patrick. He kicks himself out. Patrick says, look out, trouble. He kicks himself out. Squidly says, well, so much for their company. He plays clarinet. King Krabs says, on second thought, Squidly better go with them. They could use the entertainment. Squidly says, have it your way. King Krabs says, good luck, strange ones. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidly are now walking down the road. SpongeBob says he knows they are a prophecy and all, but he does not think they can stop the dragon with their bare hands. Patrick says, yeah, they need some gloves. Squidly says, perhaps yonder blacksmith can provide some arms for their battle. SpongeBob says at last, an honest man of the soil. Observe as he effortlessly commingles with this brutish native. He enters the blacksmith shop saying, greetings, Iron Man. He is Sir SpongeBob of Bikini. The blacksmith grabs SpongeBob with his tongs. SpongeBob finishes saying bottom. The blacksmith says he told them people before. He will have the rent when he has it. SpongeBob says they just wanted to buy some armor. The blacksmith says, oh, why did he not just say that? He lets SpongeBob go. He says, he has got just the thing for them. Patrick is holding a helmet saying this is awesome. He puts the helmet over his already worn helmet. He tells SpongeBob to get out here. SpongeBob walks out, standing on metal legs and wearing a big protective helmet. Patrick says, whoa, SpongeBob. He looks incredible. The blacksmith says, and now for the piece de resistance. He welds a sword for SpongeBob. He says, there is your sword, brave knight, hand forged from anodized dragon's skin. It is truly a weapon worthy of a knight of his stature. SpongeBob struggles, saying a little heavy, is it not? He drops the sword, which pierces through the blacksmith's chest. The blacksmith laughs, saying, that is going to need some stitches. He says, let him see what else he got. He searches through a chest of weapons. Unfortunately, all he has in the way of light weaponry is this jellyfish net. He gives the net to SpongeBob. SpongeBob says that is perfect. Later, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidly are walking towards the castle of Lord Planktonomor. Squidly says they have a long journey ahead of them. SpongeBob pulls a brown bag with grease out of his pocket. He says it is a good thing he packed them a lunch of delicious Krabby Patties. Patrick says, ooh. SpongeBob puts the patties in the brown bag and back in his pocket. Planktonomor sees the three heroes in his crystal ball. Lord Planktonomor is looking through a crystal ball. He says this is the legendary prophecy. He laughs evilly, and Princess Pearl is tied up in rope. He says, oh, that is rich. It would almost insult him were it not so funny. A character called Karen the Crystal Ball says Planktonomor, he is cocky and overly confident with himself. Lord Planktonomor says, trust in him, Karen. He knows what he is doing. He says, come hither, boy. A dragon appears. He tells it to deliver his demands unto his majesty King Krabs. He laughs evilly, then coughs. SpongeBob, Squidly, and Patrick all head to the bridge to stop the evil wizard, but a dark knight blocks their path. The dark knight speaks with a dark male voice saying, halt. Who goes there? Squidly says, do his eyes betray him? It is the nefarious Dark Knight. He sings, O Dark Knight, spare them, please. Do not cut off their heads or boil their knees. Pray take these two and let him go free, and he will give the knight some cheese. A cow moos. SpongeBob and Patrick say Dark Knight questioningly. The Dark Knight speaks with a dark male voice saying he asks once more. Before he rips them limb from limb, reveal thyself. SpongeBob says he is SpongeBob, and this is Patrick. He laughs nervously. They have been sent to rescue Princess Pearl from Planktonymore. The Dark Knight says with a dark male voice that if they wish to get across, they will have. The Dark Knight reveals herself as Medieval Sandy and speaks with a female voice saying to get through her. SpongeBob gasps and says, Medieval Sandy. He knows how to handle this. With a little karate. Both attack each other, but SpongeBob swallows Sandy, then spits her out into a rock. The Dark Knight says, by the hammer of Odin, this is a new fighting style her eyes have not yet seen. SpongeBob says he is bad. Oh yeah. Who? The Dark Knight asks if he tries to insult her. He will drink from the fountain of shame. SpongeBob asks if Patrick hears that. He told Patrick she says things like a squir. He says, whoa. The Dark Knight destroys the armor and throws SpongeBob into a rock. SpongeBob ends up having his legs and arms switched. He laughs saying, good one, Medieval Sandy. But can she handle his feat of fury? He attacks the Dark Knight, but the Dark Knight jumps out of the way as SpongeBob bounces off the rock and into Dark Knight, sending her into the other rock. SpongeBob attacks her again, but the Dark Knight pins him against the rock. The Dark Knight asks, would he like a little rub down? As she is rubbing SpongeBob, he turns into dust, causing the Dark Knight to cough. SpongeBob appears normal again and karate chops the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight says he has bested her Yellow Knight. She tells him to strike quick and true noble Sponge. SpongeBob says he does not understand a word she just said. He laughs. The Dark Knight turns into a real live-action squirrel, but with crosses for her eyes as dead. SpongeBob says, Medieval Sandy, she does not look so good. He calls Sandy's name. The screen turns black, then water is thrown onto the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight says, what? SpongeBob says, Patrick, it is working. He tells him to do it again. Patrick gathers spit and spits it upon her. The Dark Knight says, what? Where? She says SpongeBob has spared her kind and noble Sponge. And to him she owes a debt of gratitude, for she will follow him in his quest to defeat Planktonymore and learn a trifle of that karate. SpongeBob says, yeah, karate. He says wah and cha-cha. He karate chops Squidly in half. Squidly says, oweth. King Crab's advisor says, Your Majesty, repeatedly. A scroll has arrived for him. King Crabs reads the scroll aloud. He must hand over his village, and the throne or his daughter shall be dipped in a cauldron of lava. He says, Pearl. Pearl screams. Squidly says that is the shriek of the fair princess. He sings, Hark the princess, she screams from the tower. By the sound of her shrieks, this is her final hour. The Dark Knight says, then time is of the essence. Do they all remember the plan? Patrick says no, he means yes. Yes, that's what he said, yes. The Dark Knight says, then let them forge on. She says, make way, heathens. Dark Knight coming through. She says, A guard tells her to state her business, Dark Knight. The Dark Knight says these village idiots are conspirators against Master Planktonymore, and she needs to know which form of torture her master wishes upon these wretched fools. Does she have their limbs tied to horses and swiftly yanked apart? Rip. Or pluck each individual eyelash one by one, taking away their every single last eyelash wish? SpongeBob says no repeatedly. He screams in tears, then cries. The guard says, very well, Dark Knight. Entrance is granted. SpongeBob says no repeatedly. He is still crying and screaming. He says halt and to make a wish. The guard plucks one of SpongeBob's eyelashes as the other guard is laughing evilly. The Dark Knight says, wow, goodsome thinking, Sir SpongeBob. Posing as a frightened wee babe in ye old diapers did make it most believable. SpongeBob asks, yeah, do they think they fooled them? Pearl screams. SpongeBob says Princess Pearl. He must fulfill the prophecy while the Dark Knight unties Patrick and the royal doofus. Squidly says that is royal fool. SpongeBob runs up the stairs, followed by the rest of the group. He says, hang on, Pearl. They are coming to rescue her. He says, woo. Freedom is at hand. He is panting and says they are coming. He says, almost there. He says, oh dear Neptune. Lord Planktonymore says soon the king's village will be his. Mine repeatedly. Pearl screams. SpongeBob, panting out of breath, says, unhand her fiend. Pearl says the prophecy is nigh. SpongeBob says they are here to rescue her Pearl. Whoo. Could he get a glass of water? Lord Planktonymore asks, sparkling or regular. He tosses the waters away, saying Psyche eth. SpongeBob gasps and says Planktonymore truly is the nastiest wizard in all of Bikini Bottomshire. He should prepare to be vanquished. Lord Planktonymore says bring it on eth knave. As SpongeBob runs to attack Lord Planktonymore, he steps on him without knowing. SpongeBob says, what the, where? Oh. He laughs and looks down at the squashed Lord Planktonymore. He says he did not see him, he is so tiny. Lord Planktonymore gets up and uses his magic on him, but SpongeBob laughs, saying that tickles. Tiny powers repeatedly. As Lord Planktonomer is zapping him, the rest of the group frees Pearl, but she crashes through the top. Pearl says she is okay. Lord Planktonomer says, wow then, huh? He notices the dragon. He says yes repeatedly. He tells the dragon to sick them, boy. The dragon chases them. Squidly says perhaps a soothing limerick will calm the dragon. He sings there once was a dragon so handsome and smart, he let him go free for he had a big heart. The dragon zaps him. Squidly says everyone is a critic. The Dark Knight says hiya. She attacks the dragon, but the dragon zaps her. Patrick says no repeatedly. He gets zapped. Lord Planktonomer says dead end for them simpletons. He laughs. SpongeBob says, wait a second. He gets out the jellyfish net and captures the dragon who is screaming with anger. Patrick gibbers. SpongeBob says, wow, the boys back home will never believe this. Patrick says he is right here and he does not believe it. The dragon zaps his way out of the net. SpongeBob screams. SpongeBob and Patrick say whoa and no repeatedly. SpongeBob says, well, he guesses this is it, Pat. Patrick says yeah. He asks, can they eat those Krabby Patties now? SpongeBob says, sure, buddy. SpongeBob takes a Krabby Patty out. Patrick says yay. The dragon sees the Krabby Patty, sniffs it, and takes it. Patrick says hey. SpongeBob says, Patrick, look, he is eating the Krabby Patty. The dragon sniffs the Krabby Patty and eats it. Patrick says, huh. No repeatedly. The horror. The horror. SpongeBob says, no, Patrick, it is a good thing. Patrick asks, it is. SpongeBob says, sure it is. Just listen to him purr. He loves that Krabby Patty. Lord Planktonomer says, forsooth. What is going on here? He tells the dragon to destroy them. Do it now, or so help him. SpongeBob says, he would be more than happy to make the dragon some more of those delicious Krabby Patties. The dragon finally zaps Planktonomer. Lord Planktonomer says curses and that they win. Squidly says everyone is at a celebration. He says, make way. The king's heroes come through. He sings hark ring the bell. It is all ended well. The dragon is vanquished. The princess returned, and only a few of them got badly burned. King Krabs says order up. He flips a patty so the dragon catches it and eats it. He says, he wonders if he could sell these Krabby Patties. He laughs. Squidly plays his clarinet. A citizen says, ah, that horrible noise. Another citizen says, oh, make it stop. He says, whoa, repeatedly. The first citizen throws a rock through the clarinet, which makes Squidly fall down, causing the seahorses to launch SpongeBob and Patrick into the air screaming. They travel back down where it is now the present. SpongeBob wakes up. The medieval queen asks, hey kid, is he okay? That was some fall he had. SpongeBob says, oh, he guesses he should not have agitated that seahorse. That was some dream, huh, Patrick? He asks Patrick. Patrick says, try telling that to Squidly. Patrick squished Squidly into an accordion, and his clarinet is broken. The episode ends. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Friend or Foe, the Season 5 origin story special that reveals how Mr. Krabs and Plankton became enemies. Friend or Foe is a special episode from SpongeBob SquarePants Season 5 that aired on the 13th of April, 2007. The episode drew 5.91 million viewers during its original broadcast. The special reveals the origin story of Mr. Krabs and Plankton's rivalry, showing how they were once best friends who created the Krabby Patty formula together before their partnership fell apart. The episode features extensive live-action segments with Patchy the pirate working at a burger restaurant. The episode opens with a pan over live-action houses. The French narrator says they take viewers now to Encino, California, where they find the president of the SpongeBob SquarePants fan club flipping burgers. Patchy says, ooh, hey kids. Potty and he took jobs flipping burgers so they could be just like their hero, SpongeBob SquarePants. Potty says he took the job for the free sodas. Patchy asks if Potty does not have dishes to wash. A character named Mr. Piratson makes an angry sound. Patchy says, ooh, hey kids, say hello to his boss, Mr. Piratson. Mr. Piratson makes more angry sounds and gives Patchy a piece of paper that is an order. Patchy reads one order of scurvy fries, one large bilge water. Mr. Piratson makes more sounds. Patchy says, diet bilge water. Mr. Piratson makes another sound. Patchy says he will get right on it, sir. Patchy salutes. His spatula, which replaces his hook, impacts his forehead. He squirms in pain, saying, ah. The scene cuts to Potty saying what died in there. Patchy says, oh, Potty. He is just in time to try his new pirate patties. He calls one buried treasure and reveals a treasure chest on a hamburger. Potty asks, where did he dig that one up? Patchy says this one is called Walk the Plank. He reveals a wooden board on a hamburger. Potty says he is already bored with that one. Patchy says this one will blow that little bird brain of his. He says, behold, the Patchy Patty. He reveals a patty on a burger with a pickle for an eye patch, a mustard mouth, a beard around the patty, and lettuce underneath. The Patchy Patty says, ahoy. Potty says, "Aw, that's the worst one yet," and squawks. Patchy says, "Potty parrot, he is never supportive of him. He does not want to be Potty's friend anymore. He never wants to see Potty again." Potty squawks, saying Patchy no. Patchy cries and runs to another room, saying boo hoo hoo hoo. Potty makes more bird sounds. Patchy says, this is not the first time that a Patty has come between two good chums. It happened once in Bikini Bottom. He pulls down a screen. He says here, take a look, while he sniffs and says he will pull himself together. He continues crying. The episode starts with a title named Friend or Foe. It begins at the Krusty Krab when Mr. Krabs senses something. He says, something is not right. A two-tiered pink birthday cake on a cart rolls in. The icing reads, Happy Birthday, Krabs. Mr. Krabs asks if it is for him. Squidward asks if he finds this a tad suspicious. Mr. Krabs says, suspicion does not hold a candle to birthday wishing. Mr. Krabs is about to blow out the candle when Plankton pops out from underneath the candle. Plankton says, surprise. SpongeBob and Squidward scream. Plankton, smiling deviously, takes out the candle and uses it to release the balloons. Like dynamite, the balloon strings burn up and the balloons pop as confetti goes everywhere. The light from the popping blinds the customers as confetti gets into their eyes. Plankton's cart engages in its jetpack and launches itself into the kitchen while he laughs wickedly. SpongeBob says duck. Plankton says disengage. Plankton releases the bottom part of the cake onto the safe in the kitchen. Plankton lands the upper cake part onto the floor and hits a button on the control panel. The cake explodes, causing icing to go onto SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward's faces. Plankton takes the formula and flies out of the kitchen. Mr. Krabs says his secret formula. Plankton says, Happy Birthday, Krabs. SpongeBob says not to forget his condiments, Plankton. He squirts Plankton's cake ship on the windshield with ketchup and mustard. Mr. Krabs says, Attaboy, SpongeBob. He turns the ceiling fan on. Plankton's machine bounces off of it and breaks to pieces on the floor. SpongeBob snatches the secret formula with his tongue and swallows it. SpongeBob says safe. Plankton says they will rue the day they were born, Krabs. He will be back. He activates his jetpack, but he realizes it is upside down. He says, oh, barnacles. He flies and crashes into the floor while screaming. Everyone is groaning and moaning from the ordeal. SpongeBob asks why Mr. Krabs. Why does Plankton hate them so? He cries. Mr. Krabs says, well, SpongeBob might as well blame him. He sits on a barrel seat. There was a time when Plankton and he were best friends. Everyone gasps and runs up to hear the story. SpongeBob asks best friends. Mr. Krabs says, friends at birth, you might say. Even as wee ones. The flashback begins as Mr. Krabs recalls himself and Plankton as babies, which was the time they were born of the same date, November 30th, 1942. Baby Plankton, says Goo. Baby Krabs laughs, then he puts Plankton on the mobile hanging above him. Everyone says, aw. The scene cuts to flashback of Krabs and Plankton's third birthday. There is a birthday cake reading Big Boys. Toddler Krabs inhales, then sticks out his tongue to get toddler Plankton to blow out the candles. Mr. Krabs narrates off-screen that things were all peaches and cream. Plankton blows out the candles, then dives off his tongue into the cake as if jumping off a diving board into a swimming pool. The scene transitions to Poseidon Elementary School after passing years. Mr. Krabs narrates that they hit grade school. In a classroom, kids are in science class chattering and doing chemistry as the teacher reads at his desk. Krabs as a kid is writing on paper as Plankton, also a kid, holds up 2 test tubes in his gloved hands. Young Eugene Krabs says, hey Planky, what is he doing? Lil Sheldon says, oh, just a little something he thought he would try out. A spitball hits Plankton in the back of his head. The classmates laugh. Plankton says, idiots. He will show them with science. This concoction is going to blow everyone away. A muffled explosion happens. Plankton's container blows up all over his table and covers him in ashes. Classmates laugh. Billy, the ringleader of the hooligans, grabs him. Billy asks, how's this for a science experiment, Mr. Brainatron 5000? He stuffs Plankton into his straw and blows him out like a spitball. He splatters into Mr. Krabs' eye. Lil Sheldon moans in pain, saying they will pay for this one day, Eugene. Young Eugene Krabs peels off squished Plankton and says darn tooting. He says, hey Barnacle Brains. He thinks they owe Plankton an apology. Billy feigns guilt, saying Plankton is right, he is sorry. He goes back to mean and cruel bully mode, saying sorry he has to hang out with Ragboy. The bullies laugh. A girl named Anna says yeah. She asks, where did he do his clothes shopping? The trash can. The class laughs again. Krabs is on the verge of breaking down into tears. Mr. Krabs narrates off-screen that it was true. He did get his clothes from the trash. The flashback ends. Mr. Krabs says, you see, when he was growing up, times were tough. His mother had to, he sniffles, fashion him clothes from rags. The flashback continues to Krabs' mother sewing up clothes. Mama Krabs says, there you go, son. His outfit is all finished. It is a good thing Old Man Jenkins was kind enough to spare his last washcloth. Old Man Jenkins says oops. He rips off Mr. Krabs' clothes and uses it as a rag to dry his boat. He says he missed a spot. Krabs and Plankton are walking through the carnival grounds with Plankton conversing with him. Krabs has a box around his body so he does not want to be naked. Mr. Krabs narrates off-screen that then one day, while Plankton and he plotted their revenge, he met the love of his life. Kid Mr. Krabs asks what in Neptune's name is that. He picks up a penny off the ground. He says it is the most beautiful thing his eyes have ever seen. What is it? Kid Plankton says it is money. Mr. Krabs holds a note asking money. Plankton says, yeah, you can buy things with it. Kid Mr. Krabs asks, buy things. Mr. Krabs narrates off-screen that so he spent it on a gift for his best pal Plankton. Mr. Krabs buys a balloon for Plankton, but when he gives it to Plankton, Plankton flies up into the sky because of his weight. Krabs reaches up looking desperate. Back to present, everyone says wow. SpongeBob says, got your secret recipe, Mr. Krabs. He has no idea what that went through to get here. Mr. Krabs says he has got a pretty good idea, yeah. He shoves it away with a pencil. A customer named Sandals asks, so if they were such great friends, what happened? SpongeBob asks, yeah, Mr. Krabs, what did happen next? Squidward sarcastically says, yeah, he really wants to know. Mr. Krabs says, listen up, Squidward, because this is where it gets juicy. It all began in a place called Stinky Burgers. It was the only place to get a burger. The kids loved Stinky. A group of kid regulars, Billy and his gang, run up, clamoring until Stinky came with a laugh and a fart as the kids cheer. Mr. Krabs narrates that Stinky loved the kids. Stinky asks what can he do for them youngins. Billy says, Mr. Stinky, he will have one burger, please. Jimmy says him too, Stinky. Stinky says, oh, now, kids. There is plenty of burgers for everyone. They all cheer. Big Johnny says that is why they like him so much. Stinky. He always delivers the goods. Ron says they do not like Stinky. They respect him. Stinky asks, well, which one is it, kids? Do they like or respect him? Big Johnny says like. Ron says respect. Big Johnny says like. Ron says respect. Stinky says, okay, let's just meet in the middle and say they lie-spect him. They cheer again. Mr. Krabs says, excuse them. Plankton says, valuable customers coming through. Big Johnny in Billy's voice asks, what are those dorks doing here? Mr. Krabs says, 2 Stinky burgers, please. Stinky makes weird faces in shock. He asks, did their brains dribble out all over the sidewalk they slept on last night? If it is burgers they want, go around back. Everyone says, yeah, Stinky. Billy says thanks for keeping the nerds out. Anna says he is the best. Stinky says, okay, that's enough, kids. He tells them to gather around children. There is something he wants to tell them. What he has to say is very important. If they remember just one thing for the rest of their life, remember that. He sniffles. Without their kind patronage, he would be a penniless loser like Ragboy. Mr. Krabs is knocking on the door in the back of the building. Stinky opens up the door. He makes weird faces in shock again. He asks if they have kelp for brains. Do they not understand? If they keep coming around, they will drive away all the normal customers. He has worked too long and too hard to make this a lie-spectable business. As it is, he can barely afford the essential things in life. His watch beeps. He asks, is it quitting time already? He rips off his clothes to reveal some nicer clothes underneath as a millionaire. Now, if they will excuse him, he is off to enjoy some of life's essentials. He gets in his limo and moves the stack of cash over on the seat. As he closes the door and drives off, a dollar flies into Mr. Krabs' hand. Plankton asks, did Krabs hear that? By cooking burgers for those cretins, he was able to gain their lie-spect. Mr. Krabs asks, did Plankton see that fat stack of loot? He bets if someone made a better burger, they would have a fatter stack of loot. A cash register dings as Mr. Krabs' eyes turn into dollar bill signs. He asks, but who has the ability to make such a burger? Who has the skill? Plankton says skill schmill Krabs baby. Who needs skill when science is on their side? They will make that burger. And when they do, they will rule the school. He laughs evilly as the episode cartoon segment will continue. Patchy reappears, still crying. Patchy says he misses Potty. He remembers the first time they met. Patchy shows a picture of him as a young pirate holding Potty's egg in his hands. If he could only hear his voice. Potty says less talking and more working, Jack. Patchy gasps and drops the picture. He says Potty. He came back to apologize. Potty says he came to tell him to get back to work. Patchy says he cannot tell him what to do. He asks, assistant manager. How did Potty get to be assistant manager? Potty says, oh, a little thing called the GED, my man. Patchy says, oh, here they go with the fancy book learning. Customers love his cooking. Why, they are almost out of doggy bags. The customer's face turns green and throws up the food into a doggy bag. Patchy says, oh, Potty, what is he doing wrong? Potty says he just needs some practice is all. The scene shows Patchy flipping burgers and stuff, then looking through a microscope. He sees mini burger bacteria cells, then laughs and coughs. Patchy says, ooh, his patty is done. Potty says smells like an unswabbed poop deck. Patchy says, oh fine, he will try it then. Patchy eats it and then smiles, frowns, and spits it out, showing the burger he made is rotten. He says, ooh, for the crime of befouling his taste buds, he orders it to walk the plank. Patchy watches as the burger on a string jumps off the plank into the trash with water. He laughs, saying, oh well, he bets. SpongeBob's first patty did not go so well either. Potty squawks and says, roll film. SpongeBob is shown as a baby and he makes a Krabby Patty perfectly. Potty says a perfect patty on the first try. Patchy says, ooh, he will make a potty patty out of him. Potty says Patchy is unsanitary. He keeps raw hamburger meat in an old boot. Patchy says, well, that's what gives it its special flavor. He puts a small piece of hamburger meat on top and it sparkles. Potty says he has got rats in the kitchen. Patchy says, oh, he brushes and shampoos them daily. He asks who's Patchy's little princess. A rat bites him. He says ow and tells it not to do that. Potty says, and he should wash his hands after using the bathroom. Patchy asks, what? Every time. Potty says that's not all. This is a step in the right direction. Patchy asks, what kind of a pirate wears a hairnet? Potty says the same kind that wears a kiss the cook apron. Patchy says, well, he never knows Potty. He might get lucky. He asks if they hear that, ladies. Patchy is available. He winks 4 times. Potty says now he feels sick. Patchy says that's it. The feathered snake. This time, Potty has gone too far. Patchy starts flipping patties at Potty. Potty squawks saying he missed. He squawks asking, is that all he got? When Potty flies away, Patchy flips one in Mr. Pirateson's face. Potty says now he has done it. Mr. Piratson removes the patty from his face, making angry sounds. Patchy says, yes, Mr. Piratson. Potty flies into his office, then Patchy speaks as the camera shakes. He tells the kids to watch the rest of the cartoon while he watches Potty get fired. He laughs as the door busts open. Mr. Piratson makes more angry sounds. Patchy says, coming Mr. Piratson, sir. The scene cuts to Mr. Krabs and Plankton, walking by the dump, continuing the cartoon episode segment. Mr. Krabs narrates that, so they went back to their secret hideaway, the dump, to prove to those chowderheads that a burger could be semi-edible and easy to swallow. They made sure to keep careful record of their progress. Mr. Krabs and Plankton work together to make a burger and go through the steps of doing so. Plankton says gently, repeatedly. He holds up the burger on a platter. Mr. Krabs narrates they finally emerged with the best-looking burger under the sea. They went back to Stinky's to rub their patty in those kids' greasy faces. But Stinky's had been shut down by order of the health department, so they seized the opportunity and converted their hideout into a restaurant. Mr. Krabs and Plankton turn a trailer in the dump into a restaurant. Mr. Krabs cuts the grand opening tape, while Plankton pushes a button to signal for customers. A line of customers line up in front of the restaurant. Mr. Krabs narrates their adventure into capitalism began. He says, $1 please. The kid gives his dollar for a burger. Plankton says, there you are, sir. Mr. Krabs narrates it was his first dollar he ever earned, and it was also the beginning of a beautiful romantic relationship with money. Ronnie says, hey, their burgers are even worse than Stinky's. They can barely keep them down. If it were not for Stinky's shutting down, no one would eat here. Now give him a burger. He is starving. Plankton tells Krabs to just look at them. The very people who ridiculed him are now feasting on his recipe. Mr. Krabs says he thought it was their recipe. Plankton says he is ruling their stomachs, and soon he will be ruling their minds. He laughs evilly as the clouds go dark with thunder striking. Mr. Krabs asks, but what about satisfying the customer? Plankton says barnacles to the customer. He is talking about ruling the world. He laughs evilly again, and thunder strikes again. And with this secret recipe, nothing will stop him. Mr. Krabs says, give him that. Plankton says, stop. Krabs is going to bust it. The recipe tears in half. Mr. Krabs says burgers are not for ruling worlds. Plankton says he is terribly sorry, Eugene. He could not hear him. Could he come closer? Maybe stand on the tile in front of him. Mr. Krabs asks which one. The one that says eject or the one that says trapdoor. Plankton says, oh, either one will do. Mr. Krabs says what he was saying was. Plankton pulls a string that the ejectile launches Mr. Krabs out of the restaurant. Mr. Krabs says he will regret this one day. Mr. Krabs lands in the trash. Back to present, Mr. Krabs says, and Plankton always did. Plankton pops out of the pepper shaker saying lies. SpongeBob is about to swallow the formula again, but Mr. Krabs takes it and puts it in his back pocket. Mr. Krabs says, hold on there, his boy. They do not need to go through all that again. Plankton says, very touching but completely false. Mr. Krabs says he does not know what Plankton means. Plankton asks, why does Mr. Krabs not tell them the truth? SpongeBob says it did happen that way. Did it not, Mr. Krabs? Plankton says most of it is true except for what really happened. They had created the tastiest burger. That's when things became unsavory. The flashback happens again to the restaurant. Mr. Krabs laughs evilly. Mr. Krabs says first he will rule their stomachs and then he chuckles evilly, their money. Mr. Krabs laughs evilly as the clouds go dark with thunder striking again. Plankton asks, but what about satisfying the customers? Mr. Krabs says barnacles to the customers. Plankton gasps in horror. Mr. Krabs says he is talking about coins, cash, wallets, bank accounts, and with this secret recipe, nothing will stop him. Plankton says give him that. Both try to take the formula again. Mr. Krabs says stop. Plankton is going to bust it. The recipe tears in half again. Plankton says this is not about money, Eugene. Mr. Krabs says malarkey. Mr. Krabs puts Plankton in a straw and spits him out. Plankton says he will regret this one day. He lands in a pile of trash saying, ouch. He emerges and looks at the half of his recipe that says, and a pinch of chum. He says, huh. Plankton narrates off-screen that their little squabble only got him part of the recipe. SpongeBob says, gosh, Mr. Plankton, that does not sound like the Mr. Krabs story at all. Karen says that's because it is not. SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, and Plankton all say Karen questioningly. Karen says they are both liars. That's not how it happened at all. In those days, she was just starting out as a security system. Plankton and she met when he installed her. Plankton says it was only their third date. Karen says anyways, she had recorded the whole thing in her databanks. The flashback appears on Karen's computer screen. Plankton says, now that's a handsome-looking burger. Mr. Krabs says he said it, old chum. He speaks over intercom saying, attention, and to get their Plankton and Krabs patties right here. A tumbleweed rolls by. Mr. Krabs asks if Plankton thinks it was a good idea to open in the dump. Music is playing in the background. Plankton asks what's that music. Mr. Krabs says he would know that theme song anywhere. It is Old Man Jenkins. He calls out to Old Man Jenkins. Old Man Jenkins puts a tire in his boat. Old Man Jenkins says he'd just been searching for some new shoes for old Bessie. Mr. Krabs says Jenkins has helped his mom and him through some tough times. It would be an honor if he would be the first to try their delicious burgers. Old Man Jenkins says why he would be happy to. He bites into the burger, then smiles. Mr. Krabs and Plankton say yeah. Old Man Jenkins falls down unconscious. Later, a newspaper appears on screen. Mr. Krabs reads Plab Patty's KO Old Man J. He cannot believe they poisoned that sweet old guy. Plankton says, well, he is old. Mr. Krabs says, hey, that guy is like family to him. Plankton says, well, it was his fault the patty was tainted. Mr. Krabs says Plankton is the one who put too much seaweed sauce in the burger. Plankton says Krabs let it sit out too long. That's what did it. He is taking the recipe and fixing it. Mr. Krabs says no way. That recipe is his. Both fight over the recipe one last time. Plankton says stop. Krabs is going to. The recipe tears in half one last time, sending both into opposite sides of the restaurant. Plankton walks out as the clouds go dark one last time. He says Krabs wants to fight over this recipe. He will give him a fight he will never forget. He slams the door, causing a shelf above the boiling patty meat to spill the jars into the cauldron. Mr. Krabs says, well, that's ruined, but no use letting this go to waste. These kids will eat anything. He licks some of the patty mix. He says he has done it. He has discovered the perfect patty batter. Karen narrates off-screen that meanwhile Plankton was back at the elementary school, but this time he was going it alone. Plankton puts a chum bucket with meat in it, while Mr. Krabs wheels in Krabby Patties and knocks him over. Mr. Krabs says, oh no, he does not. This is his turf. Plankton says he thinks not, Ragboy. Mr. Krabs asks what? Why he ought to squash him right now. Plankton says get out of his face. Both growl at each other. Jimmy says, hey look, nerd fight. Billy says he bets $5 on Ragboy. Plankton says, aha, they will let the customers decide whose burger's better. He says, step right up, gents. Get a delicious chum burger right here. Billy says Big Johnny will eat anything. Big Johnny walks over to Plankton's side. Plankton says, have a chum burger, Johnny, sir. Johnny eats it. Karen narrates off-screen that Plankton had pieced together his own creation using memory and science. Plankton says, go on, sir. Tell his buddies what he thinks. Big Johnny spits the burger out on both his friends. Billy says he is going to try one of Ragboy's burgers. Mr. Krabs says, here you are, sir. He is the first to taste a Krabby Patty. He hands him a patty. The customer takes a bite and instantly enjoys it. Billy says flavor. Billy says edible. Ron and Ronnie say they can actually hold it down. A girl says this is the most flavor-tastic sensation her still-developing taste buds have ever experienced. Everyone says yay Ragboy. Plankton says he will show Krabs. He will steal that cursed recipe from him one day, and he will not stop until he does. The flashback ends. Mr. Krabs says woohoo and ha. His recipe was, is, and always will be the best. Plankton says Krabs would not have that recipe if it were not for him. Mr. Krabs asks if Plankton is calling him a liar. Karen asks, will these men stop yelling at each other? She cannot believe they let a recipe ruin such a wonderful friendship. Both tear up. Mr. Krabs says Plankton was his only true friend that did not have a president printed on him. But money does not hug back. Plankton says his life has been nothing but a long line of disappointments since they became enemies. All these years he has been trying to steal the formula, but he was really just trying to steal back their friendship. Mr. Krabs asks really. Plankton says it is all he ever really wanted. To get back to the way it used to be. Him and Krabs against the world. How about a hug Krabs' old pal? Mr. Krabs says he would like that planky old chum. Both hug and cry. SpongeBob asks if this does not warm Karen's heart. Karen says she supposes it would if she had one. Plankton says he is sorry, Krabs' old buddy. Mr. Krabs says him too repeatedly. Plankton grabs the formula from Mr. Krabs' back pocket. Plankton says, now Karen. Karen grabs the formula. Plankton tells Krabs to back off Ragboy. He laughs as he jumps on the formula and Karen wheels off. SpongeBob gasps, saying sabotage. Plankton says go Karen. Everyone chases each other outside. Patchy reappears. Patchy says, oh, that Plankton never learns, does he, kids? As for him, he decided to take some time off to catch up on his reading. He holds up a newspaper that reads the word jobs on the front. Potty says Patchy did not take time off. He got fired. Patchy says, hey, Potty got fired too. Potty says he got a golden parachute. A golden parachute appears on Potty's strings. The inside of the restaurant glows. Patchy says, well, at least he knows they will never be able to replace him. Potty squawks, saying looks like they already did. Patchy gasps when he sees a gorilla. Patchy asks what. They let a smelly, hairy flea bag like that serve food. The gorilla makes enraged growling and roaring. Patchy says, hey, watch it, ape. The gorilla starts throwing food and ingredients at Patchy. Patchy says, watch the patch and ow repeatedly. He says no and please. The gorilla keeps growling and roaring. Patchy says, ooh, he has a tomato allergy. Ow, right in the buns. Ow and ooh and ow and hey. He is warning the gorilla. The French narrator says, and so, kids always remember to follow your dreams. Unless you are Patchy, then just stay in bed. The episode ends. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.